we do see those clear spells, likely to turn quite chilly, perhaps a touch of rural frost in places, but generally just staying that little bit milder, particularly across the northeast of Scotland, where we do hold on to that cloud and outbreaks of rain into the start of Tuesday. So here it will be a bit of a damp start, particularly across parts of Shetland and Orkney through Tuesday morning. Generally for mainland Scotland, though, a bit of a brighter start, plenty of sunny spells to start the day. Any mist and fog that we might see will clear relatively quickly through the morning, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England too. We could see the odd patch of mist and fog in places. For parts of Wales, Northern England, generally a dry, bright start to the morning, plenty of sunny spells on offer to start the day. As we then head through Tuesday morning and in towards the afternoon, we will start to see some showers bubbling up, particularly across parts of England, Wales, maybe one or two across Northern Ireland too, though these generally not quite as heavy as we saw on Monday. Then all eyes out towards the west, we start to see this weather front arriving across Northern Ireland, pushing its way eastwards as we head through the afternoon, perhaps some quite heavy rainfall in places. But where we do see the sunshine, it will be feeling really pleasant. Temperatures 17 or 18 degrees, so a little above average for the time of year. That weather front then continues to spread its way eastwards as we head through Tuesday evening and into the start of Wednesday. Any showers across eastern areas gradually easing through the night, and that sets us up through much of next week. Some sunny spells, some showers, some longer spells of rain, but temperatures generally around about average, perhaps a little above in places.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
You two met, I mean, since we last saw each other, then you two have done Strictly. And, but the fact that and there's quite an age gap.
51 years.
51. And yet...
I was granny.
But the fact you clearly get on really well and you've stayed in touch and you've developed a real friendship.
We really do. I mean, we live 5 minutes from each other. We speak most days, and Angela had this amazing campaign with Let's Dance, and obviously I was very, very much supporting that. And when you just get on like a house on fire, we just do. We get each other. We have great banter, and like you said, there's 51 years between us, but we feel like we've known each other for 51 years. You have a particular interest in getting dance back into schools, don't you? I mean, your own experience of this, because your dad is a professional footballer, and you actually won a place, didn't you, into the football academy? It was sort of expected that you were going to be a footballer. Yes, it was. I was expected to be a football player, naturally, because I was the eldest son, and, Southampton wanted to sign me in the Premier League, and they still are, just. No, I chose to be a dancer, and it was because my dad and mum sent me to dance classes because I was very hyperactive as a kid. I was pretending to kick a football all the time. They sent me to my next-door neighbour's dance school, and the class was called Tango Tots. I somehow ended up being a dancer and had to tell my Geordie dad when I was 12 years old that I wanted to be a dancer.
How did that go down?
It went fine. It's not like the film, not like the film, but it's very, 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 very supportive. And obviously the brother ended up being the football. But you're very keen to get dance back into schools, aren't you? Tell me why. I'm so keen, because for kids that can't afford it, why not just give them the opportunity to learn to dance? We live in a world today where we're on the phones, we're on TikTok. Kids are learning to dance anyway, so why not regulate it and let them learn it in school for free?
GB News, the People's Channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Pope Francis has died at the age of 88. Announcing the news this morning, the Vatican Carmelengo said he has returned to the home of his father, beg your pardon. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and of his church. Tributes have been pouring in for him from across the world, and we'll have all of the reaction to this sad passing throughout the show. And let's cross straight now live to the Archbishop of Westminster making a statement following the death of Pope Francis.
Thank you very much for coming. It's a sad occasion, and I have to say I wasn't expecting it today after what we saw of Pope Francis on the balcony and giving his blessing yesterday. So I have issued a statement which I'll just read quickly in case you haven't seen it. The death of Pope Francis brings great sadness to so many around the world, among Catholics, other Christians, and in societies in general. A voice proclaiming the innate dignity of every human being, especially those who are poor and or marginalised, is now silent. The legacy he leaves is one we must seek to carry forward and strengthen. Pope Francis was called to priesthood through his experience of the mercy and compassion of God. This remained the core of his ministry as priest, bishop, and pontiff. Only in understanding the love and mercy of God towards each one of us can we fashion societies and communities that bear the mark of the kingdom of God. This same focus and emphasis lay at his desire to see membership of the church as being rooted in missionary discipleship, a dynamic and powerful vision for every Christian and every community. Now we pray for the repose of his soul, that he may know in full measure the merciful and loving embrace of the Father, the one God, to whom he gave his life in unstinting service. May he now rest in peace and rise in glory. Thank you. Tim, a little less formally.
Good afternoon. What really struck me about Pope Francis is his profound desire to make everybody seem welcome. This is one of his phrases. He would say, all are welcome. Todos, todos, todos. Because he believed the church should be a universal home, a home in which everybody feels welcome, everybody feels at ease. He was a man who had an enormous capacity to encounter people. If ever you met him personally, you knew that at that moment his whole attention was on you. Not just because you were another human being, but because he believed that every human being was made in the image and likeness of God. And so his renewal of the church, which he sought all his life, always passed through encounter and welcome. I first met him shortly after his election when Cardinal Cormac rang me one night and said that the Pope wanted to speak to me. And this seemed to me highly unlikely. So I sent an email saying, I believe the Pope wants to speak to me. And I got an email back to saying, I do. And for 40 minutes, he really wanted to know what I, an unimportant Catholic priest, what I really thought he should do. He had this capacity to listen and to open himself to people that he met. That was quite extraordinary. And that is another reason why we shall miss him so enormously now.
Thank you, Tim.
So would anybody like to start with the questions? If you just, as I say, give us your name and who you're representing, please.
Good afternoon, Paul Brown from GBNews. Both of you will be young enough just to vote at the upcoming conclave. Presumably you'll be attending. And would either of you wish to become Pope yourselves? Which may well be considered.
Tim, that's for you, not me.
I believe the Holy Spirit is far too wise, even to think of me.
Too old, not capable. Yeah, no. I'll go quite peacefully. I remember the lovely story that Cardinal Hume told me once, that at this moment in his life, he went to Rome for the conclave and was amazed that there was an escort at the airport to meet him and drive him into Rome. He said there was nobody there to bring him back. So that's how I'll be. Yeah. Yes, please. Do you know, Ruth, I'll try, but I think we're jumping ahead a bit. You know, the Holy See, I think, is asking for 9 days of mourning. And in a way, that's more important than speculation about the next bit. He has to be a man of great inner strength and, I think, great inner peace. I'm not as privileged as Tim in meeting Pope Francis that often, but one time I did meet him, and he said to me that after his election he goes along to the chapel of St. Paul before appearing on the balcony, and he said to me, from that moment in the chapel of St. Paul to that day when we were talking, he said, I have never lost my inner peace. So I think those inner capacities of closeness to God and peace are the absolute essentials.
I think that we always open ourselves to be surprised. All recent popes have been quite different from each other. And often we think, will a pope in fact continue the legacy of the previous one? But we trust that the Bishop of Rome, whom we need now, will be given us. And we may be surprised.
Bridget Evans from Sky News. Can I just ask how you think his legacy will be remembered and the impact on the church that he leaves as opposed to the one he took 30 years ago?
Go on, you go first.
I think one of the things that will be most remembered for is the whole process of synodality, which is not gathering people to make decisions about the structures of the church. It was to renew us as a community, the people of God, who listen to each other and learn from each other. I think in a world which is ever more fractured, ever more broken, ever more violent, Pope Francis believed that the peace of Christ comes to us when we open ourselves to listen deeply, with all our heart, with all our imagination, to other people. And so in our noisy world, ever more inclined to be violence, I think he's given us an extraordinary legacy of listening, which heals, which overcomes distance, breaks down barriers.
I agree very much with Cardinal Tim. I think one of the most remarkable things he's brought to the church, and therefore will be remembered by, is his understanding of the importance of gesture and how powerful single moments can be. I remember, for example, one time in St. Peter's Square, he greeted quite intimately with a kiss a man with a most deformed face. There's over and over again, he's chosen the action for the moment, which speaks more than many a papal encyclical. I think that's a great gift he had. John Paul had a great gift with crowds, to raise and, as it were, motivate a crowd. This man does it by small gestures, and they're so powerful. Yeah. Yep. From Brent? Yeah.
It's clearly important that Pope Francis defied his doctor's orders in the last 24 hours by being as active as he was. Do you think that everyone will know now that he ought to have heeded his doctor's warnings and recuperated for a further month?
I'm not in a position really to comment on those details. I think it's always been very clear that he's a man who knew his own mind, was very determined to do what he wanted to do, and did not easily follow advice. I mean, a tiny example for me, and probably for Tim as well, but there was a routine by which people who were chosen to be cardinals would be contacted and warned. I learnt off the television that I was named a cardinal. I think you were having a siesta.
I was having a siesta, and I wondered why there were 43 emails arrived while I was asleep. My brethren in Oxford knew before I did. And it was typical. My first reaction was that I didn't want to be a bishop because I wouldn't have a diocese. Make no sense. And immediately I went to him. He understood. He said, "Be at peace. Do whatever you want." And then he crept up to me that afternoon and he said, "And you don't have to get all the cardinal's clothing." It's often said that I asked him, but actually he proposed that to me. Yeah. He was extremely attentive to everybody that he met. He looked them in the face. He read people's faces. And I think if he did feel impelled not to obey the doctor's orders, and I don't know, it would be because he had a thirst for contact. He lit up in people's presence.
Ruth again.
It's a total shock hearing the news this morning. I wondered if you both shared that sense of shock and surprise. And also I wanted to ask what you would miss most about him.
Well, I was utterly surprised. I was driving up the M1 and one of your agencies rang me and said the Pope has died, and I said, "You're joking," because I really did not expect, after yesterday, his death today. What will I miss most? I think I will miss most the freedom that he had. I think it was most remarkable to hold together that highest office in the church with a kind of personal and inner freedom. And that's what I will constantly look to with admiration. Yeah. Yes, please.
A freedom and his smile.
Yes, please.
Hi. Maria Victoria, it's Andrew from Tiempo, Colombia. One of the areas of work was with the migrants, and especially on this hostile environment against migrants internationally. What do you think will be his following in the work he did with the migrants?
He believed that we encounter Christ in the stranger. Indeed, that's what it says in the Gospel, Matthew 25. And I think he summons us all to that openness. And there are all sorts of moments coming up now when I think many countries will be raising barriers again, when migrants will feel less and less welcomed. But they are Christ for us. And I think he has helped the church to a much deeper awareness about how in the migrant we meet our Lord. And so we welcome the gifts that they bring, the gifts that they are.
The Times. As mentioned, there are now 4 English cardinals, 3 who have voted. What does that say about sort of the relationship between the Holy See and the Church in England and Wales at this historic moment? Are you expecting that the 3 who have a vote will be there in the conclave? I don't know if Michael Fitzgerald might be present in Rome as well. Do you have a sense of whether you will have a sort of English group of you who will be discussing things as they go on?
Do you mean a kind of lobby? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, what strikes me is the 4 of us are very different. You know, we're from very different sectors of society, with very different experiences. Cardinal Michael Fitzgerald's got an immense experience of interfaith relations with Islam, the countries of the Middle East, things about which I know very little. Cardinal Timothy's been the leader of the worldwide Dominicans, so he understands religious life.
And that was a press conference there. That's the Archbishop of Westminster at Westminster Cathedral, and also Timothy Ratcliffe, Cardinal Timothy Ratcliffe, reflecting now, looking forward to 9 days of mourning ahead. How will he be remembered? The Archbishop was asked about his extraordinary powers of listening to break down barriers. The Archbishop of Westminster there told an extraordinary story of how he was with Pope Francis at St. Peter's Square when he kissed a man with a most deformed face. John Paul was a pope who had the power to motivate a crowd. This man did it with small gestures, and he expressed surprise, great surprise, the fact the Pope was dead. When he learned of that news, he said, "You're joking." He seemed so well yesterday. Of course, he made a public appearance yesterday. He met the Vice President of USA, J.D. Vance, and Timothy Ratcliffe there, finishing off by saying, "I will remember his freedom and his smile." Well, joining us now is GBNews' royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who's live outside Westminster Cathedral there, where that press conference is taking place. Cameron, welcome to the show. The world united in its grief, and there, actually, already, the Archbishop of Westminster and Cardinal Timothy Ratcliffe looking back fondly with a smile on the face of a pontiff many regarded as somebody who liberalised Catholicism, who looked forward and made the church more inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely, Martin. Of course, an incredibly sombre day here, but of course the memories will live on forever. And the Archbishop of Westminster, I think it was quite interesting that he was saying he was incredibly surprised when he learned of the death of Pope Francis this morning, who died at 7:35 local time at the age of 88. Because as you just mentioned, Martin, we saw him, didn't we, yesterday in St. Peter's Square for Easter Sunday. He wished the crowds a happy Easter, and then an aide read out his blessing on his behalf. But he got in his Pope-mobile. He was greeting members of the public, waving to them. Babies were being passed up to him for him to give the blessing. And then, of course, very sadly, less than 24 hours later, the Pope passed away. But of course, we knew that his health was deteriorating. He spent more than a month in hospital, Martin, with a double bout of pneumonia. Before that, of course, even at the age of 21, he had part of one of his lungs removed again for pneumonia itself. But I'm stood, of course, outside Westminster Cathedral, one of the big focal points really for England and Wales and the Catholic faiths. And there has been a mass here earlier on today where hundreds of people gathered together in prayer. And I've been inside a couple of times this afternoon, and there are many individuals, I think, just silently reflecting. A shrine has been erected for Pope Francis as well. We are also expecting a special mass held by the Archbishop of Westminster at around 5:30 p.m. this evening. But of course, we've also had tributes pouring in from around the world. Flags above this cathedral are flying at half-mast. The Holy See flag is flying above half-mast. King Charles has ordered that Royal Residence Union flags also fly at half-mast, and he himself has paid tribute to Pope Francis. And he only met him, didn't he, just 2 or 3 weeks ago in the Vatican for a short 20-minute meeting alongside the Queen. And we are told that the King wished the Pope well with his health, and Pope Francis very kindly wished the King well with his own cancer journey as well. So a day of being quite sombre here today, but of course what a legacy Pope Francis leads. And then of course we look towards electing a new Pope. The Cardinals will elect a new Pope, and probably will start around 15 days' time, that conclave.
Thank you very much for joining us there. That's Cameron Walker, live from Westminster Cathedral, where that press conference is still taking place inside. And let's cross now directly and speak with Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, who is, of course, a practising Catholic. Sir Jacob, it's a pleasure to have your company, even on this sombre day. May I first get your reflections on your thoughts, your prayers for Pope Francis?
Well, Catholics pray throughout their life that they should have a provided death, and the Holy Father has had a provided death. From his point of view, this is what he would most have wanted, that he's died in the octave of Easter with the hope of the resurrection at the forefront of his mind, that this is the perfect culmination of a Christian life, that if you look at the endurance that he showed. He was on the Via Dolorosa with Christ in his ill health over the last few weeks, and then he has died immediately after Easter Sunday, on Easter Monday, with the hope of the resurrection. I mean, I think if you are the Pope, you're interested in the next life rather than this life, that eternity is the important thing. And so it's not so much a day of mourning as of enormous hope and confidence in the teaching of the Catholic Church and the hope that Christ gives us through the resurrection.
And now the Church itself, Sir Jacob, perhaps find itself at something of a crossroads moving forward. Which direction should the Church take? Of course, Pope Francis was listed as a moderniser, perhaps, a liberal. Do you think that's the direction of travel of the Church, or would you like it to perhaps return to a more traditional, conservative outlook?
Well, the thing about the Church is that it goes on for centuries. It's been going for over 2,000 years. It's not like a general election where a new person will change in one direction and then back again 5 years later. It's about considering and contemplating eternity, and the choice of the next Pope is with a higher authority even than the cardinals. It's with the Holy Ghost, who will give us the Pope that the Church needs. And the Church finds development and renewal through each Pope, but with that fundamental continuity based on that great truth of the resurrection on which all our faith is centred.
And how do you think Pope Francis will be best remembered, Sir Jacob? I mean, he has been put down for a lot of achievements as a moderniser, particularly on gay rights, on climate change, on inclusivity, on immigration, asylum. How do you think he'll be remembered?
Well, I think he actually has always stuck rigorously to traditional Catholic teaching. He focuses on the individual, and that on every individual having a soul that is loved by God and being redeemable. All of us, every single one of us, even the two of us, is redeemable. And that's really a remarkable gift of God, that we are made in God's image, and the Holy Father reminded everybody of that. But he never deviated from the teaching of the Church. He never said that things that the Church has historically said are wrong are right. He stuck to the teaching of the Church. The liberals often thought he would do more and that he might allow women priests and so on. He was always absolutely clear that that wasn't going to happen. He never deviated from the fundamental teaching of the Church. And on the environment, well, at the Easter Vigil we get the reading from Genesis about man being given dominion over the birds of the air and the fishes of the sea and so on. And that's all apart with the ancient teaching of the Church.
Okay, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on the passing of Pope Francis. We'll cross back to you throughout the show for more reflections. Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Now, plenty more to come throughout the show, including much more reaction, of course, to the passing of Pope Francis. This is GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time is 3:26 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. And let's get more reaction now to the news. The sad news that Pope Francis, the first Latin American leader of the Roman Catholic Church, has passed away at the age of 88. And I'm joined in the studio in Westminster by the historian Rafe Hadel-Mancu and the political commentator Alice Grant, who is, of course, a the procedure, the ceremony, the rites. What happens next?
Well, as soon as the Pope dies, the Vatican, the Holy See, goes into a state of what's called a sede vacante, the empty chair. So essentially, there is no Pope at the moment. All Vatican offices, essentially, or most of them, end with the Pope's death, except for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the liturgy, but also this role you'll hear about, the Camerlengo. The Camerlengo is a senior cardinal who now acts as the temporary head of state between now and when the new Pope is elected in about 15 to 20 days. And it is the Camerlengo, who essentially is the Chamberlain of the Pope, who calls out the Pope's name 3 times. And there's no responses given. He can then formally declare the Pope is dead. The death certificate will be issued. At that point, the Pope's desk is locked and the doors to the papal apartments are sealed with a ribbon to signify that no business of the papacy can continue for this period. They won't be unveiled again until the new Pope comes to power. And it's at that point that the Camerlengo destroys the papal ring, the episcopal ring, or the fisherman's ring, piscatory ring, sorry, the fisherman's ring, goes back to St. Peter, because that's the symbol of the Pope's authority from medieval times. Catholics would genuflect and kiss the ring. And, of course, the ring was used to seal documents, importantly. So now we've got into we'll go into the funeral and then the 9 days of mourning. And it's at that point that you'll have the conclave gathering. Viewers may, of course, remember there was a film out recently called Conclave, which legitimately are not dealt with some of the politics that go on in the conclave. But essentially, there'll be a period for all of the cardinals of the church to come together. There are 120 who are allowed to vote. They must be under the age of 80, although there are actually 136 cardinals in total. And they will then have a series of ballots where they decide who the next pope should be. All of that is held in secret. In fact, the last pope said anyone who reveals what happens during the conclave will have immediate excommunication, so serious is this. At the end of every ballot, they look at the pieces of paper to see if they have a 2/3 majority. Has to be a 2/3 majority, a supermajority. If they don't reach that level, all the ballots are threaded with a needle and thread, and they are burned. And to the fire is added some black chemicals, and that causes the black smoke to rise up to say we don't have a pope. Now, this ballot carries on 2 ballots in the morning, 2 ballots in the afternoon, until finally they reach that 2/3 majority. And it's at that point that they are burnt again with white chemicals this time to create the white smoke. The bells of St. Peter ring out, and you then, of course, have the famous habeas papam, we have a pope, is declared. But until then, then we're in a period of mourning. The Pope is currently in the state apartments for the members of the clergy to pay tribute. He'll then be transferred to St. Peter's Basilica for pilgrims and Catholics in general to pay their tribute.
Rafe, an excellent summary. Thank you very, very much. Alice, let's talk about the achievements or the mood, the direction of travel, if you like, during Pope Francis's tenure as the Pope. Of course, he tackled the child abuse scandal head-on, dealt with that. Capitalism, he called the dung of evil, outspoken on immigration, saying immigrants should not be treated as pawns on the chessboard. He was open about sexuality. Who am I to judge? He famously responded when asked about the potential for gay priests. In fact, Elton John called him a hero. Is that the direction of travel you think the way the Catholic Church is going? We've seen with the Church of England, for example, there we go, the Church of England, for example, we've seen becoming more progressive, more liberal, and now there's a future battle for the identity of the Catholic Church. Where do you think the Church will go? Will it go towards that more liberal wing, or will there be a battle to try and get it back on its conservative tracks?
It's very interesting. I think first I'd like to say that Pope Francis probably unjustly has a reputation as more liberal. In fact, I think he was very staunchly faithful to the true doctrine of the Church as it has been for hundreds of years. He did many incredible things as well, which demonstrate his commitment to the faith, whether it was consecrating Ukraine and Russia to the Immaculate Heart. And, you know, obviously he spoke a lot about mercy, and as you're right, you know, he was outspoken on some issues which aren't perhaps considered traditional. But I have to say that he was very staunchly a defender of the faith in many ways, as it is traditionally. In terms of the direction of the future of the Church, obviously it's very interesting. I think among the young people especially, there is a tendency towards conservatism. After all, a lot of young Catholics are Catholic precisely because we reject everything that we're seeing and witnessing in our society currently, especially with like a lot of breakdown in family and in community values, and everything that is sort of crumbling in the modern world we find in the Church. We find community, we find family, we find so many beautiful things, and a real sense of appreciation for heritage and tradition. So I think that we will see a shift. The generation of the 60s and 70s, which were really when we saw a major shift in sort of the Church, and definitely a tendency toward liberalism, that those days are over. I really truly believe that. And so I think that the future is obviously very exciting, and who knows what will happen precisely, but I think there is definitely a resurgence in a more traditional view and way of practicing the faith.
Fascinating. And Rafe, that brings us on to the prospect of who could be the potential successor or successors. And back to that point, there does already seem to be a schism, if you like, between the conservative traditional wing and the more progressive wing. Where do you think the Catholic Church is heading?
Well, it's a very important point that Alice makes. There is this now division between the young devotees and the old guard in the Catholic Church. You must remember, of course, the Pope was actually not only one of the most consequential popes, but also, you could argue, controversial. But he saw it as his mission to fundamentally change the nature of the Church and to radicalize it. Part of that meant turning it away from Europe. It was a very Eurocentric Church. 80% of the cardinals who are going to be casting their ballots, he put into office. So there is every reason to believe that his own belief and his own shape of the Church will be continued by the cardinals, even though the young clergy are far more conservative. And so the cardinals, in many respects, don't reflect the views and attitudes of many of the young clergy who are being ordained and coming in. But I think the overriding legacy of the Pope will have been this ability to recognise that the Catholic Church has changed. Catholic attendance in Europe is declining. It is the global south, of which he was the first ever Pope, who is where the strength is growing for Catholicism. That's why he's introduced so many more cardinals from Africa, from Latin America, and so forth. And that's why, of course, you've had these controversies, because he sees political issues and other issues from that global south perspective. And it's not one, of course, that's often shared by many people in Europe.
And I wonder, Alice, it seems counterintuitive to most people that the younger generation should be getting more conservative, because across the Western world, it's the younger generation accused of being more liberal, more woke. Why is there this schism within Catholicism?
That's interesting. I wouldn't say that there's some sort of major schism. I think the generation of the 60s, and I mean, everything that happened in the 60s was so extreme in turning sort of the cultural tide towards very liberal agenda when it came to sexuality, when it came to all sorts of areas in our society. That's over. And in terms of, in fact, I think Rafe mentioned it very rightly, that there are obviously more cardinals coming from South America and Africa. These are very traditional countries and continents. I mean, Africa is one of the most traditional places in terms of the way they view the faith and the way they view gender roles and family. So, you know, you have cardinals like Cardinal Sarah, who's a favourite among conservatives in the church, and he's African, he's very staunchly conservative. There is no moving down towards any of the most important or controversial points of the faith in the modern eyes in the West. But I think that, yeah, it is a reaction to the 60s. It is a reaction to what happened after the 60s as well, and how that has affected my generation growing up. You know, so many people in my generation came from families which had been, you know, affected by divorce and all these sort of more, you know, problematic things that happened in our society. Basically just the destruction of the family unit and the importance of that community. So...
And it has to be said also that many people on the left were actually quite disappointed that Pope Francis, as they saw it, didn't go far enough on many social issues, on issues like contraception, on abortion, on surrogacy, gay marriage and so forth. Actually, he maintained very traditional perspectives and views upon those sorts of things. Again, understanding, of course, where the balance of power lies within the Catholic Church more broadly.
OK, thank you very much. We have to leave it there for now. Of course, we'll be straight back with more reactions soon. That's Rafe Hadelmanku and, of course, Alice Grant joining me in the studio. Now, plenty more still to come throughout the rest of the show, including much more reaction to the passing of Pope Francis, including from Anne Widdecombe.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Drivers on the A68 at Jedburgh are facing northbound restrictions due to an incident. Please approach with caution and allow extra travel time. On the MS62 eastbound at Junction 20 in Rochdale, a collision has led to one-lane closure, resulting in a 30-minute delay. Meanwhile, in Northamptonshire, the A14 eastbound between junctions 15 and 16 in Catworth has congestion, with delays of up to 40 minutes. In Swindon, a broken-down vehicle on the A419 southbound at the junction with the A361 has closed one lane. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Can you find love in your twilight years? That's what we're asking this morning. Broadcaster Ryan Mark Parsons and former Conservative MP Anne Widdecombe join us now. Good to see you both this morning. Anne, let's start with you. Is 70 too old to date, do you think?
70 isn't too old for anything. Everybody ages at different rates, both mentally, physically, in the sorts of things they like. When you say to me, is 80 too late to, is 70, well, we might even say 80. It's too late to find love. The answer is just look around you. Lots of people have. But let me say right away, no, that's not an invitation. I've absolutely no ambitions in that area at all.
Ryan Mark, what do you make of it? Do we need to stop putting a bar on ageing and dating?
No, I don't think we should. I think once you get to such an old age, you really should be looking for love internally. I mean, you should self-love. I just don't see the point at 70 years old to be searching for love at that point. I think you should go on holiday somewhere. I think you should find love with the sunshine and a cocktail, perhaps, instead of looking for a man or a woman. I think at what point do you decide that, you know, love is not going to come around knocking on your door? And I think probably at the age of 70, that is when you should decide it's time to give up. I'm 24, living in London. I know how incredibly hard it is to find love. I don't know how anyone who has wrinkles and grey hair at the age of 70, over someone like me, could perhaps find love. I just don't think it's possible. I think it's a nice idea, but I think it's not feasible. And also, I don't think there's any point at that age.
The People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's 20 to 4 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Let's get more reaction now to the sad news that Pope Francis, the first Latin American leader of the Roman Catholic Church, has sadly passed away at the age of 88. We can now speak with the former Conservative minister and, of course, Catholic herself, Anne Widdecombe. Anne, a pleasure to have your company, even upon this sad occasion. What are your thoughts, Anne Widdecombe, on the sad passing of Pope Francis?
Well, I think it probably came as a shock to most people because although he had been ill, quite obviously, yesterday there he was in his Pope-mobile going through St. Peter's and greeting people there, blessing babies, doing all the rest of it, giving J.D. Vance rosaries for that matter. You know, there he was active. And then he was able to do his Urbi et Orbi to the world. Now, suddenly, he's died. But I think people will remember that last very valiant effort. He must have been feeling terrible. He was quite literally, as we now know, hours from death. And I think that is what people will remember. There are two ways of doing it as a pope. One was the way that Benedict did it, and after centuries of popes just dying naturally, did actually retire and become Pope Emeritus. The other way is the way that John Paul did it, and now Pope Benedict has done it, which is that even if you are very old and you are very ill, you go on right up to the hour of your death.
And Anne Widdecombe, what's the significance, you believe, or the symbolism of Pope Francis passing away at Easter?
Well, obviously there is a symbolism there. And it will be extremely memorable as a result. The Easter is all about death and resurrection, and we have a pope dying, and we will then have a new pope, and the church, which is a living church, will go on. I think Pope Francis played, in a way, a very, very canny game. He always spoke as if he was the ultimate liberal. But, as one of your commentators has observed, he didn't change anything. And that way he pleased everybody. He pleased those who wanted to be more liberal, because he sounded as if he was. But he pleased the traditionalists because they knew that nothing had changed.
Is that the great skill, do you think, of being that shapeshifter? Because the liberal press, they adored him for his perceived liberalism towards LGBTQ, climate change, refugees, asylum seekers. And yet, as you say, nothing actually changed.
No, the body of doctrine stayed exactly as it was. In fact, the only one who's changed anything of substance doctrinally was, ironically, it was the arch-traditionalist Pope Benedict, who abolished limbo within about 5 minutes of becoming Pope. This Pope has stuck rigidly to the body of teaching that has been inherited by the Church down the ages, but his language was very different. And I think that's why people believed that he was leading the Church in a different direction.
And so, Anne Widdecombe, you don't see a future direction of travel where the Catholic Church might do a Church of England and start to worship at the altar of woke?
Well, I have to say, God forbid. And I believe he will forbid it, because one of the reasons that I left the Church of England back in 1993, despite a hugely Anglican background that I came from, the reason that I left was precisely because the C of E no longer knew what it believed. The attitude is anything goes. The Catholic Church has a very, very different approach, and one which I greatly appreciate. And no, it's not suddenly going to overturn everything it's always held dear just because it's fashionable. Indeed, the very essence of Pope John Paul's encyclical Veritatis Splendor, which made a huge impact when it came out in the 90s, was that something can be wrong and still very, very fashionable, and something can be right and profoundly unpopular. But right is always right, and wrong is always wrong.
Anne Widdecombe, thank you very, very much for joining us and sharing your thoughts today here on GB News. Always a pleasure to get your company. Thank you very, very much. I'm still joined in the studio here by the historian Rafe Heidelmanku and the political commentator Alice Grant, who, of course, is a practising Catholic. Rafe, let's come back to you. Interesting there what Anne Widdecombe said about the fact that a lot of people were deserting the Church of England because it became a church of woke. And Alice saying actually young Conservatives, young Republicans, young Catholics are going against that. There's no danger anytime soon, is there, of the Catholic Church becoming the Church of Woke, becoming a woke pope?
No, we'll have to wait and see what happens at the conclave. But in terms of the laity as a whole, certainly it's not going woke in any way. The problem with the Church of England, of course, is trying to be all things to all people. And those churches that are increasing, the evangelical churches, the Catholic Church, religions like Islam, they clearly stand for something and they have clear codes which people want to subscribe to. And I think that's where the appeal lies in this day and age. Look, the Pope can be left-leaning without being woke. And the Pope's mission as he saw it, was to ensure that the church didn't get too comfortable and was actually still had that revolutionary spirit of tending to the poor, the vulnerable, and the needy. It's no coincidence that he chose the name Francis. It was a homage to Saint Francis and his concern for people. And so you can absolutely be concerned about immigration and all these sort of issues without subscribing to other progressive, more radical issues. For example, gender reassignment. He was always very conservative on those levels too. But this was a man, remember, when he came to office, he wanted to make the church look more outward. He installed showers at St. Peter's for the homeless. They could get weekly haircuts. He invited beggars to come to his birthday. And so that was really and he got rid of all the trappings of the papacy and just wore simple thick white clothes in an effort, as he saw it, I would imagine, to live the life that Jesus led. And I think that's the sort of socialism to which we can all see the attraction and the holiness behind that sort of a philosophy concerned with the very poorest in society, which is why, of course, he didn't even live in the papal apartments. He lived in a normal suite and actually in a sort of a hotel.
OK, thank you very much, Rafe. And Alice, I promise we'll come back to you shortly, but we have to go to a break now. If you're in search of some holiday sun, here's the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, here's your latest holiday sun forecast brought to you by the Met Office. We'll see plenty of sunshine across the Mediterranean over the next few days, but also plenty of showers, some of those on the heavy side. Certainly on Tuesday, a few showers across the Canaries and Madeira, some more persistent spells of rain across parts of Spain, and then we head into a mixture of sunshine and scattered locally heavy, even thundery showers across central and eastern parts of the Med. As for the rest of the week, well, western spots will tend to brighten up, certainly some warm sunshine developing here, but plenty of showers continue further east.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening and welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. There's been plenty of rain around for many of us on Easter Monday, but it is going to be turning drier as we head through this evening and overnight. Plenty of clear spells in places. However, low pressure is still very much in charge of our weather. We see that weather front from today continuing to push its way north and eastwards, and the legacy of that cloud, outbreaks of rain continuing across parts of Scotland through the rest of this evening. For the majority of the rest of us, though, any showers that we've seen gradually starting to die out this evening, so turning dry with plenty of clear spells on offer as we head into the early hours of Tuesday morning. Well, we do see those clear spells could be turning quite chilly, perhaps a touch of frost in places, and also seeing some mist and fog forming under those clear skies, but generally staying just that little bit milder across the very far northeast, where we do see that cloud and the continuation of some outbreaks of rain persisting through Tuesday morning. Across mainland Scotland, generally a drier picture, a bit of a brighter start to the day. Some mist and fog across parts of Northern Ireland will clear quickly through the morning, as well across parts of Northern England too. But across parts of Wales, the southern half of England, a dry and bright day. Plenty of sunshine and blue skies on offer to start the morning. As we then head through Tuesday afternoon, while we do see any sunshine across the southern half of the country, there will be one or two showers bubbling up, though these likely to be much lighter and a bit more scattered than we saw on Monday. The legacy of that cloud and rain does continue across the very far northeast of Scotland, and then it's all eyes out to the west as we see this next weather front arriving. Feeling pleasant in that sunshine with highs of 17, 18, perhaps 19 degrees, but feeling a bit fresher across Northern Ireland. That weather front then slips its way south and eastwards into the start of Wednesday. It's quite a damp start for much of England and Wales, but the northern half of the country seeing a brighter start to the morning, although still some cloud across the very far northeast, and some showers bubbling up here too. That sets us up through much of next week. Some showers, longer spells of rain, but some drier interludes too, and temperatures around about average or perhaps a little above.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:51 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. And let's get some more reaction to the passing of Pope Francis. And we can now speak with GB News Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley, who is in Leeds. Leeds there, looks like the sky has opened, it's tipping down with rain. Anna Riley, what's the mood on the ground?
It is, Martin. Well, much like the weather here, there is a sombre mood on the ground here in Leeds. There's been a service here at Leeds Cathedral earlier today, Easter Monday Mass, but also a time for Catholics here to gather and pray for the late Pope Francis, who passed away at 88 years old. We've been speaking to people here in Leeds, Catholics that attended that service, were praying for the Pope, and this is what they told us.
He's going to rest in the glory and the peace of our Father in heaven. So it's both joy and sadness in a sense.
And I thought, there was much they could do. It's sad, very sad, because I'm a Catholic, I'm a practicing, you see, so it's a bit sad. What can I say?
And his sense of sense of humor is really, really great. Sometimes when I listen to him and the way he makes people laugh, I'm like, oh, this is really a great man. So he used to be remembered because of his sense of humor, actually.
It's always a mixed feeling when the Pope dies. We're grateful as Catholics that he's returned to his Heavenly Father, but obviously great sorrow at the passing of a great man, a real leader of the Church, an important person for our faith and for our Church. We hope for the future of the Church that his successor will carry on many of his great works.
We also spoke to the Bishop of Leeds, Marcus Stock, earlier, who said that the Pope would have felt blessed that he passed away over the Easter weekend, and he reflected on what a legacy that Pope Francis will leave. And of course, churches like this one and up and down the country will be open throughout the week for people to come and light a candle, pay their respects and pray for the late Pope Francis.
Thank you very much. That's Anna Riley. Getting the reaction in Leeds. Thank you very much. Now, a quick comment, if I could, from Alice Grant, who's in the studio. You have some fascinating information shared with me there about the ideological leanings of the candidates and where you think the Church might be going next.
Yes, so according to a map that I've just seen, obviously I haven't quite verified the data yet, but it looks like the ideological makeup of the conclave this year will be leaning towards Conservative. And sort of the liberal part is the segment is quite small, so and I believe that. But also it's interesting because it brings into question really what we mean by these terms, liberal and conservative. After all, the Catholic Church, the teachings are considered so conservative.
OK, thank you very much. We'll have much more reaction throughout the next hour, and of course to the passing of Pope Francis with Rafe Hayden-McCoo and Alice Grant here in the studio. See you soon.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's been a mixed picture over the bank holiday weekend, and that's going to continue as we head through much of next week. Some drier interludes are possible, but we will also see some showers and longer spells of rain. We've got low pressure across us at the moment. A weather front brought some rain last night and into this morning, and that will continue to push its way north and eastwards as we head through the rest of Monday evening. Plenty of showers following on behind, particularly across Northern Ireland and parts of Northern England, though those gradually starting to ease as we head overnight Monday and into the start of Tuesday, where we do see those clear spells likely to turn quite chilly, perhaps a touch of rural frost in places, but generally just staying that little bit milder, particularly across the northeast of Scotland, where we do hold on to that cloud and outbreaks of rain into the start of Tuesday. So here it will be a bit of a damp start, particularly across parts of Shetland and Orkney through Tuesday morning. Generally for mainland Scotland, though, a bit of a brighter start, plenty of sunny spells to start the day. Any mist and fog that we might see will clear relatively quickly through the morning, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England too. We could see the odd patch of mist and fog in places. For parts of Wales, Northern England, generally a dry, bright start to the morning, plenty of sunny spells on offer to start the day. As we then head through Tuesday morning and in towards the afternoon, we will start to see some showers bubbling up, particularly across parts of England, Wales, maybe one or two across Northern Ireland too, though these generally not quite as heavy as we saw on Monday. Then all eyes out towards the west, we start to see this weather front arriving across Northern Ireland, pushing its way eastwards as we head through the afternoon, perhaps some quite heavy rainfall in places. But where we do see the sunshine, it will be feeling really pleasant. Temperatures 17 or 18 degrees, so a little above average for the time of year. That weather front then continues to spread its way eastwards as we head through Tuesday evening and into the start of Wednesday. Any showers across eastern areas gradually easing through the night, and that sets us up through much of next week. Some sunny spells, some showers, some longer spells of rain, but temperatures generally around about average, perhaps a little above in places.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. On the A9 southbound approaching Inveralmond roundabout, drivers face disruptions due to a broken down vehicle. Please proceed with caution. The M4 eastbound at junction 33 Capel Lanilturn is experiencing congestion on the off-slip. In Lancashire, the M6 southbound between junctions 36 and 34 is congested, with delays of around half an hour. Normal traffic is expected later today. Meanwhile, the A419 in Swindon has a lane closed southbound at its junction with the A361 due to a broken down vehicle. Drive safely, and for more travel news go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with skyroof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock and Pope Francis, the head of the Catholic Church, the Bishop of Rome, has died. He was the first pope from both the Western Hemisphere and Southern America, ascending to the papacy in 2013 as the figurehead of the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. And Cameron Walker takes a look back on the life of an extraordinary man.
March 2013, and Jorge Mario Bergoglio stood on the balcony of St. Peter's in Rome and said a simple Buenos Aires.
Fratelli e sorelle, grazie tante dell'accoglienza.
It was the start of a very different pontificate from his predecessor Benedict, who'd retired from his onerous duties. The former Archbishop of Buenos Aires was the first pope to take the name of Francis, the saint of the poor and of nature. He was, though, to usher in a time of richer relations with his worldwide congregation, both in style and substance. And that soon became evident as he made his presence in the Vatican more accessible. Gone were the grand papal apartments. He moved to the Casa Santa Marta to live simply with others. When he visited the headquarters of the EU, he did so in a battered car, and a more informal approach echoed the approach of John Paul II. The carnival is over, he declared, referring to the Vatican's cliques and factions. There was instead a whirling circus of high-profile media appearances. The Pope wanted to be part of the modern world. He was clearly spontaneous and open. When asked about homosexuality, he answered, "Who am I to judge?" But did indeed pass judgment publicly on those who had been abused.
Faccio un sentito appello per la lotta a tutto campo contro gli abusi di minori nel campo sessuale come in altri campi, da parte di tutte le autorità e delle singole persone, perché si tratta di crimini abominevoli che vanno cancellati dalla faccia della terra.
This was one of his earliest challenges, how to deal with the spectre of child abuse that had hung over the Catholic Church. His papacy became an opportunity to end decades of evasion and cover-ups. But traditionalists were fearful of his modernizing tendencies, affirming in their view, when he banned the Latin Mass, a form of liturgy popular with conservative Catholics.
Buon pranzo e arrivederci.
He went on to speak one then of Muslims as brothers, and was vocal in his support of migrants, even taking in some families to live in the Vatican itself. He also pitted himself against African Orthodox bishops on the issue of homosexuality, where Pope Francis went further than his predecessors. Although he never actually blessed the concept of gay marriage, he appeared to observe the rule of love above the rule of law. In a documentary for the Disney Plus channel, he also reflected that priests should be merciful towards women seeking an abortion. As the world was gripped by the COVID crisis, Francis publicly encouraged all Catholics to get vaccinated. He called this a small gesture of love in poverty, at a time when skepticism was sweeping parts of the globe. But the death toll was rising. Especially across his home continent of South America, he felt the need for practical as well as spiritual leadership. With the invasion of Ukraine, the Vatican needed to deliver its own message in the war of words between Russia and the West.
Questa bandiera viene dalla guerra, proprio da quella città martoriata, Bucha.
Pope Francis denounced the wake of death and destruction, describing the war as a crime against God and humanity. He warned of a rising nuclear threat, echoing the views of millions when he said the world once more feels fear and anguish.
Per favore, non dimentichiamo di pregare per la martoriata Ucraina.
But despite this continued spiritual strength, his physical being was weakening. Knee problems left him using a wheelchair for long periods. In the summer of 2021, he underwent abdominal surgery, and then bronchitis hospitalized him in the spring of 2023. It was an acknowledgement of his increasing frailty. He felt a malaise, he said, but I wasn't afraid. And he continued with his duties in all humility. He had admitted drafting a letter of resignation in the event of illness, making it impossible for him to continue with his duties as Benedict had done. But then, in a more recent interview, he reflected he had no real intention of taking that step. His ministry, he said, was his life.
An excellent tribute there from Cameron Walker. And I'm joining that man now. It's GB News' correspondent, Cameron Walker, live from Westminster Cathedral. Cameron, welcome back to the show. A short while ago, the Archbishop of Westminster and Cardinal Timothy Radcliffe gave a press conference in the cathedral behind you. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, incredibly sombre, Martin, as you can probably imagine. And in fact, the Archbishop at the start of that press conference expressed his surprise that Pope Francis had indeed passed away this morning, because it was only yesterday that we saw him on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica waving to the crowds and wishing them a happy Easter. He was not well enough to read the blessing, so aides did that on his behalf, but he was determined to be close to the crowds and got in his Pope-mobile in St. Peter's Square and drove around waving to them, and babies were passed up so he could give his blessing to them. But then, of course, came the news this morning at 7:35 local time that he had passed away, Pope Francis, at the age of 88. Of course, he'd had a number of health battles in recent years. You heard some of that in the obituary there. But more recently, he spent more than a month in hospital battling double pneumonia in Rome. And when he was 21, of course, he had part of his lung removed again because of pneumonia. But today here at Westminster Cathedral, there has been a steady stream of Catholics walking into the cathedral, reflecting in silent prayer. And there was a lunchtime mass as well earlier today, where Pope Francis, of course, was the central theme. And we spoke to a few of them earlier. This is what they said.
OK, we can't seem to get that footage yet, perhaps. Cameron, we'll return to that as we can, but perhaps you could share with us the mood of people that you spoke with on the ground there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we were saying, the mood of people on the ground here is incredibly sombre, but also thankful for Pope Francis's service to the Catholic Church. And in fact, the Archbishop of Westminster, Cardinal Vincent Nichols, said the next Pope during the press conference must have inner strength, great inner strength, and inner peace. But he stresses the important thing is this 9 days of mourning, which the Catholic Church is now experiencing. And at 5:30 this evening, there will be a special mass dedicated to Pope Francis inside Westminster Cathedral. In the Vatican itself, at 6:30 London time, there will be a rosary prayer service taking place, and that is a Catholic tradition particularly associated with funeral rites. And speaking of the funeral of Pope Francis, we don't have a specific date yet. The Vatican has not released it, but we do have some details of what it's going to be like, and it will be different from previous Pope funerals. For example, Pope Francis has specified he wants a coffin, a casket of simple wood rather than the traditional lead and oak, and he wants to be married in St. Mary Major Basilica rather than the grand vaults underneath the chapel in the Vatican. So it appears Pope Francis is being humble, was humble in life, and he's being humble once again in death.
And Cameron Walker, I believe now we do have that footage of Catholics you spoke with earlier. Let's take a look.
It was not any pope, it's our pope. It was our pope. And, well, I think it's the best for him because he stopped feeling well, or he was very ill. So I think it's the best for him.
And how do you think his legacy will be remembered?
A pope that made lots of changes, and he was very brave, and, well, he was a strong man, with conviction.
It's certainly a very devastating news. He's the Holy Father, he's the head of the Church Universal, and I think all Catholic faithful in the world must be devastated hearing this news today. I think it might be too early to make a statement about his legacy now, but I'm quite confident his pontificate will be one of the most important pontificates in the modern history of the Church.
He was elected. I was also as a tourist here in London, and I came to this place when we saw that the smoke was white, and we all want to know who is the new Pope. So I'm very moved that today I hear that he's entered immortality.
Well, King Charles has ordered Union flags across royal residences to be lowered to half-mast today, and he has paid tribute to Pope Francis, saying he and the Queen were most deeply saddened to learn of the death of Pope Francis and were greatly moved to have been able to visit him earlier in the month. Of course, that was during the state visit to Italy. Sir Keir Starmer has also paid tribute, saying a pope for the poor, the downtrodden and the forgotten, and President Donald Trump saying, "Rest in peace, Pope Francis. May God bless him and all who loved him." Tributes really have, Martin, been pouring in across the world for Pope Francis, and we are also expecting a member of the royal family to represent the United Kingdom at his funeral.
Thank you there for filling us in from outside Westminster Cathedral. Cameron Walker, thank you very, very much. We're still joined in the studio by the historian Rafe Hadel-Manku and the political commentator Alice Grant, who is, of course, a practising Catholic. Welcome back to you both. Rafe, I'll start with you. One of the thornier topics that Pope Francis faced upon himself becoming Pope was dealing with the historical legacy of the child abuse scandal that had racked the Church for decades. Nobody had ever really grasped the nettle, and Pope Francis made it his big mission, but it took him a while to get going.
When he succeeded from Pope Benedict, he inherited a church, as you said, that was in crisis, and there was a combination of a feeling of despair and denial prevalent throughout the elites of the clergy there. And it has to be said that in the first few years, he did not necessarily conduct himself in the correct way. He promoted a Chilean bishop who had covered up priests as involved in paedophilia. Reports that he ignored a report into an American cardinal who had been abusing priests as well. He was very dismissive of a lot of accusations, believing that they were founded in nothing more than gossip. But he recognised the fault of all of that, and I think he would have acknowledged that that was the biggest regret and mistake of his papacy. And in 2018, he apologised for all of those mistakes. In 2019, he called out that for the rooting out and the addressing of sexual abuse within the Church. And so seriously did he take it that, in fact, he took to telephoning personally sexual assault survivors, and he personally spoke to many of these people himself to apologise personally on behalf of the Church, which is quite remarkable. And look, the issue of sexual abuse in the Church hasn't finished or ended, but it's certainly progressed a long way from when he inherited the office.
Alice, let's bring you in at this point and talk about Pope Francis' standing amongst Catholics. How was he respected as a man and perhaps as a moderniser?
That's interesting. I think, that his personal approach is something that really shined forth throughout his papacy. But also, I think from the faith perspective, he was someone who definitely upheld and safeguarded the central tenets of our faith and our beliefs amidst a modern world which so vehemently criticises Christianity. And I think that's something that's made him both popular, again, across generations, but also across sort of political divides. We've spoken a bit about today the sort of, liberal versus conservative polarizations within the Church. But I think Pope Francis was someone who actually unified far more than he divided. And he was really able to, bring us all together. And despite the media constantly picking and drawing everything, he said that, was either too liberal or perhaps too conservative. I think ultimately he will be remembered as someone who promoted unity and who promoted compassion and mercy, and especially in terms of the sort of the geopolitical situation and with war. He has been someone who's advocating for peace so consistently. I think that's something very impressive and quite rare.
Great. And Rafe, outspoken on capitalism. And you said yourself earlier on, the pontiff, a socialist. before he became the Pope. He called capitalism the dung of the devil.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Yes, precisely. I think this idea that he was a woke pope or whatever, I think it is for the birds. What he was quite clearly as a socialist, and he saw Jesus as a socialist too. And he was a member of the global South. And if you look at people from the global South who are of the left, these are people who actually believe that capitalism is bad. These are people who believe in the asylum system, and of course many of these cardinals who are conservative leaning, who are joining now the conclave to be voting, yes, they'll take a dim view on things like gay rights, on things like trans issues and other hot woke topics, but they'll be very strong on anti-racism. They'll feel maybe a push towards reparations. There are lots of other issues which affect the global South, which aren't part of the Western liberal idea of what progressive politics is, but nevertheless are very radical and pose a challenge, I would say, to the Western traditional order of things.
Do you think, Alice, that Pope should be dallying in politics like this? I mean, when he famously responded, "Who am I to judge?" about the question of gay priests, as I said earlier, to the point where Elton John called Pope Francis a hero. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, I thought, was brilliant when he said he appeared to be a moderniser, he appeared to be a liberal, but actually nothing really changed.
That's interesting. I think the phrase, "who am I to judge?" isn't necessarily political. I mean, it's just sort of honest. I mean, we are not called to pass judgments on the way other people live their lives. We're called to be a witness to the faith and to the principles of the faith. And marriage is taught in the Catholic Church between a man and a woman. That's never been denied by Pope Francis. In fact, it's been upheld. So really, I don't see him as someone who is at all political. I think he was very compassionate. And of course, in the modern day, that will be interpreted as him being soft, but not at all. He was someone who was, had conviction. We had the laity speaking earlier. I think he'll be remembered as someone who is strong and who was strong throughout his life.
Well, it should be said, though, that he did advise the American Council of Bishops to resist Donald Trump on the issue of immigration, for example. So, and he did make his feelings known about those sorts of issues, and of course, which led to a bit of an altercation with the head of Border Force in America too. So.
I would say no one could argue that Donald Trump's rhetoric, especially on issues like immigration, has been Christian. I mean, at the heart of our faith, we believe in love and we believe in charity. That's something we uphold as Christians as fundamental. So love of neighbour. And we can condemn, the way that our asylum system has been completely abused. I mean, I'm an ardent Brexiteer. I have very strong political views and strong opinions, but I think they always come from a place of love of neighbour, ultimately, and especially in this country, above my country. So there is no necessarily way to sort of make out that you can have a compassionate approach and you can be strong in what you believe in.
Okay, excellent stuff. Let's get some regional response now and speak with our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire, and also our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie. Dougie Beattie, I'm going to come to you first there in the driving rain in Northern Ireland. What's the reaction been amongst Catholics?
Well, it's not just amongst Catholics. This Pope in particular, there was many things that he was, but he was an evangelical Pope. He believed in getting into the ghettos of Buenos Aires. In fact, one of his best friends was a guy called Louis Paul, who was a Presbyterian evangelical minister in that area with him. And it got great respect here in Ireland, and usually Catholicism, Lutheranism, Calvinism was dividing in the society. This Pope in particular very much married that and said about people getting back the values, and particularly family values. And earlier on there was a book signing in here, books of condolences, and I caught up with a few of the families that were attending that.
There's a lot of talk in terms of divine mercy and the mercy that God wants to show each of us. So as a family, that really drew it in for us, and especially when we went to World Meeting of Families, he spoke of the three most important words being please, thank you, and I'm sorry. And it was just simplicity, to draw families in a simple way.
He had plenty of time for the poor as well. So he was a Pope of Mercy. So Lynette said there were World Meeting of Families, and those three words echoed out even just for families is the please, thank you, and sorry was the three words that we'll remember him for. We try to teach these children as well the three most important words. Sometimes the hardest word to say is that word sorry as well. So we're keeping our prayers, and please God, he'll be merciful on the Pope looking down today.
Bittersweet moment is it that he has passed, and we wanted to call to the cathedral here in Bismarck, as a sign of respect.
One of the main things about this Pope, of course, was his humility and his human spirit. And it was said that when he actually flew out to vote for the new Pope at the start of his term, that he didn't realise he was going to be Pope. He still had the return ticket in his pocket to Buenos Aires. But the guest house that he was staying in, apparently he went and actually paid the bill personally, even after he had become Pope. That says a lot about the man. I was fortunate enough to see him in 2018 when he came to Ireland on that papal visit, and it was sad to see actually that not an awful large amount of Catholics had came to see him, because his message was very clear, one of an evangelical preaching and getting out amongst the people rather than being a Pope that was far away from them.
Thank you, Dougie Beattie. Excellent stuff there from Northern Ireland. Let's cross now to Scotland. I'll speak with our reporter, Tony Maguire. Tony, what's the reaction been up there in Scotland?
Yeah, good afternoon. Well, I think the weather kind of almost tells the story of how a lot of people are feeling today. Very much the heavens have opened and it's been completely vertical rain all day here in Glasgow, and that mood, as you might imagine, extended to the people who we caught up with earlier today. And it's worth saying that a lot of people had picked up on the news before they'd left the house today, but not everybody. And indeed, you know, talking to them was really the first time that they had heard the news of Pope Francis's passing.
Pope has died this morning.
Oh, I know, that's sad, eh?
I've seen pictures of him yesterday, but it didn't look too good, so...
They expected him to die about, say, 7 weeks ago. It was death's door, then he made a recovery, but no, well, picked a good day to die.
So crazy, so crazy timing. Okay, no, yeah, we didn't even know, so you told us.
There you go.
Mum's Catholic, my dad's Protestant, so, but yeah, it's sad news, obviously, for a lot of people all over the world, exactly, yeah.
So I'm not shocked that he has died. He has been ill. There might be some symbolic in it happening on Easter Monday, but wherever he is, I hope he has found rest.
Now, certainly today there's been an outpouring of commentary and messages of support to this 750,000 Catholics across Scotland and of course beyond, from First Minister John Swinney, who called the late Pope a trailblazer as the first Pope in history from the Southern Hemisphere, where the Scottish Secretary Ian Murray said that Catholics across Scotland and the globe will see this as a terrible day. Now, Anas Sarwar, leader of Scottish Labour, he was in attendance this afternoon behind me in the Metropolitan Cathedral of St Andrew here in Glasgow, where a 1 o'clock mass was held in memory of the Pope and to pray for his body. Certainly here in Scotland, and I would imagine across the UK and indeed the world, you know, will be mourning the loss of Pope Francis and wondering whether the next Pope will be able to follow in his footsteps to bring younger generations into the Church. Of course, can't leave without saying this is the first Pope in history to appear on the cover of Rolling Stone with his rock record out last year called Wake Up, which was hymns to some upbeat tunes. That gives you an idea of a Pope who was trying, irrespective of what it might have looked like on the outside, he was trying to make the Catholic Church for everybody. And that is going to be something that whoever takes over from him is going to have to continue on.
Thank you, Tony Maguire, for that. Some touching tributes there. And, of course, the unvarnished honesty of the great Glaswegian public. Thank you to Tony Maguire and also to our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie. Now, there's lots more still to come throughout the rest of the show, including much more reaction to the passing of Pope Francis. This is GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new Royal Newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it?
no,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back. Time is 4:26 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Pope Francis, the first Latin American leader of the Roman Catholic Church, has sadly died, aged 88. And let's see how other religions are responding to this global news. I'm speaking now with the rabbi and the social campaigner, Dr. Jonathan Romain. Jonathan, welcome.
Very just.
Welcome to the show. Can I get your...
Can we turn it up, please?
I think we're still struggling to get a link there. Can you hear us now, Dr. Romain? Okay, we'll establish that link and come back shortly. Let's get back to the studio here. I'm still joined, of course, by historian Rafe Hadelman-Koo and the political commentator Alice Grant, a practising Catholic. Let's talk, if we can, Alice, about this prospect or the notion that a pope should be a cross-faith figurehead, if you like. There seems to be a lot of pressure these days to be cross-faith. Doesn't seem to be that pressure, perhaps, towards the Muslim community. Nevertheless, is it the job of a pope to be cross-faith and inclusive, or is it the job of a pope to be a Catholic?
Absolutely. I think as Catholics, we all feel very strongly about the Catholic faith being the one true faith. So it doesn't come as a surprise that I think the Pope has always been quite staunchly clear that Catholicism is the faith. He is the head of the Church. He has inherited Peter's seat, and that is who he represents. In terms of what's known as, cross-faith dialogue or ecumenism, it's an ideology which pervaded a lot, again, in the sort of 60s and then had a kind of resurgence in the 80s. But as you mentioned, the issue is that it's always the peaceful, loving religions reaching out to ones that are not so peaceful and loving and not receiving the same sort of openness. So especially with Islam in this country, we do have a real crisis because it is a religion that doesn't share many of our Christian values. So even if we wanted to have that dialogue, I find it quite unlikely to see that there would be the same sort of level of reciprocity in terms of trying to work something together, because this is a very different religion.
And Rafe, in France in 2016, when a Catholic priest was murdered on Islam, Pope Francis said it is not right to identify Islam with violence. I think that in nearly all religions there is always a small fundamentalist group, adding we Catholics have them too. So again, you know, being inclusive, but it's not the job of a pope to draw parallels with other faiths. Is it just a job, just get on with being a Catholic?
Yes, it is. Of course, turn the other cheek, of course, is an essential part of the Christian doctrine of the New Testament. And so when you do see any of these sorts of statements being made by the Pope, indeed on immigration and everything else, they're all firmly rooted in the Christian tradition. And they always must be seen with that. Of course, now, look, everybody knows, I think, my views on the threat we face from Islam as well, so I would strongly disagree with the sentiments in that message. But certainly I would think, it behooves any leader of a church to be open to interfaith dialogue, because, of course, we all want to get along well with each other.
But is it not the point, though? I was clumsily trying to make it earlier. Always seems to be the job of other faiths to be more inclusive, to be more welcoming. Let's pray together, let's stand together. But it doesn't work out that way in practice.
I think we should actually look to the Catholic tradition. Traditionally has been one of a strong assertion of Catholic principles and Catholic doctrine, and currying no favour with accommodating other beliefs and so forth, respecting other traditions and other beliefs, but being strong and confident and assertive. Whether you're a national government or a religion, people respect people who have strong beliefs and stand by those. And I think it would behoove people in this country to take a page out of that traditional teaching and actually stand up for Christian values. You saw that, for example, just recently with Easter, where, of course, you've had, for example, the Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, thanking Christians for their contributions to this country, as if Christians are just another segment of British society. Britain is a Christian country. We have an established Church of Scotland. We have an established Church of England. It is the national religion.
Alice, you're nodding along there.
Yeah, I mean, that was just so wonderfully put and so true. I think the biggest issue in our society currently is that we are not strong enough in our principles that have built this nation for centuries. If we had the courage and the conviction of other religions like Islam to show and to practice our faith, imagine the resurgence that this country could face culturally, societally, and of course, within our religious communities as well. That is so key. So I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you just have to look around the world. Religion is one of those things that forges national identity. Britain is inherently a Christian country. So many of our institutions, of our laws, of our philosophies are rooted in Christianity. Christianity gave birth to Western civilization. Western civilization created the modern world as we know it. So we should be unashamed and unapologetic to celebrate the Christian faith, the Christian message, and the great legacy that it's left the entire world. And I think we don't do that enough. And it's fine to respect other religions, but in a country like Britain, Christianity must be predominant and must be preeminent in its high days and holy days, must be celebrated in priority to anything else in our society. And I'm afraid we don't see that anywhere near enough.
Well put. Now let's cross to the rabbi and social campaigner, Dr. Jonathan Romain. Dr. Romain, can you hear us this time? I hope so.
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Wonderful. Brilliant to have you on the show. Tell us about your thoughts of the sad passing of Pope Francis and what it means to the Jewish faith.
Well, we were very sorry because he, on one level, he continued the really very rich tradition of interfaith relations between Judaism and Catholicism and, of course, other faiths too. And that's one of the great success stories of the last 50 years. For the last sort of few centuries, we've been sort of hammer and tongs and, heresies and all and so forth. But really, one of the great stories has been the way the faiths have come together and seen each other as on the same side rather than as rivals. And Pope Francis continued that tradition. But frankly, we're sorry to see his passing in his own right. I mean, he was special the day he was elected because, as you know, he was the first non-European for several centuries. And he was so different, wasn't he, from Pope Benedict XVI. Benedict XVI had this sort of atmosphere of sort of being quite severe, sort of academic, whereas Francis, people warmed to him, he warmed to others. He was a much more cuddly figure in that sense, and he was very much the people's pope. But the interesting thing about him was he wasn't just all cuddles. He actually tackled some very serious issues, and perhaps the two major ones are Firstly, gay people, which has always been a taboo in the church, and he went out of his way to acknowledge them, meet them, greet them, bless them, and really went as close as he possibly could to involving them in church life without sort of overturning actual Catholic teachings. So that's a great piece of outreach to a persecuted minority. And then that applied even more so to women, which has been another sort of issue for the Catholic Church, hasn't it? And he launched this consultation about increasing female involvement in the church. It didn't actually reach any groundbreaking changes, but he certainly set the tone and did all the groundwork, which hopefully the next Pope will be able to take much further. The big question in my mind is, did he know he was dying? And of course we won't know that, but he certainly knew how much people wanted to see him on that on Easter Sunday, and he knew how much it meant to people, and he delivered, and he was a Pope literally right to his last breath.
And Dr. Romain, I wonder if the direction of travel for the Catholic Church should be, say, for example, like the Anglican Church, to go more liberal, to go more mainstream, to go more woke, for want of a better word. Alice Grant, a practicing Catholic in the studio here, saying actually what a lot of Catholics seem to want is a return to conservatism, a return to true Catholic values. Certainly the Church, Catholic Church, is growing greatly in Africa, in Latin America. They don't share the liberal views of the Western world, of the Anglosphere. Why should the Catholic Church modernise? Is it not the job to protect the faith, to stay true to the core values?
Well, yes, it is, but it depends what those core values are. I mean, if they're love, hope and charity, and befriending the poor and reaching out to people, then that's great. If it's persecuting a minority, perhaps like, or marginalising them, like the gay community, or if it's denying the rights of 50% of world population, in other words, female, I'm not sure if that is an important value. And there's no doubt that certainly in England, the Church of England has suffered, really, because it was just so out of touch with people, and there's been this sort of disconnect between the hierarchy and the laity. Now, that doesn't mean going woke. You can still hold on to your core values, but there are certain things that change. And again, we've seen this in the church, certainly the Church of England, which now has women priests. Can you just remind yourself, 25 years ago, and the first woman vicar, and the horrendous hullabaloo, and they thought the heavens were going to open. And of course, actually, the Church of England has been saved by the contribution of women, both women laity and women clergy. So reaching out to people, being inclusive, doesn't mean giving up on values.
OK, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your thoughts. That is the rabbi and social campaigner. Thank goodness we got a connection there in the end. Dr. Jonathan Romain, thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Thank you. Lots more still to come to now and 5 o'clock, including pressure on MPs to opt out of World Health Organization powers. Not all just about the Pope today. We have other stuff in the show today. Stick with us.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Drivers on the M9 westbound should be cautious due to a broken down vehicle between junction 10 and 11. Congestion is on the M4 eastbound at junction 33, Capel-Lanil turn. In Lancashire, congestion is on the M6 southbound between junction 36 and 35, with 20-minute delays. In Bedfordshire, travellers should expect 30-minute delays on the M1 southbound between junction 14 and 13. Finally, congestion affects the A27 westbound between the A270 Brighton East and the junction with the A23, adding 10 minutes to journeys. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
From a PETA point of view, I see you guys are in the newspapers today, PETA, and it's about the definition of a rat. Have you seen this story?
Yeah, I have indeed. And, you know, rats are individuals. And of course, we want everyone to respect all animals. But one point I would like to raise is that, you know, we mention animals who are going extinct. There are over 2,000 species right now that are on the endangered list.
Well, rats
and there are
won't be one
thousands
of them.
more. Well, you know, rats are important as well, but we're here to talk about, you know, the dire wolves. And it's important to point out that we need to think about what's going to happen to these animals once they're released back into the wild, because this is really complicated.
Yes,
and we need
yes.
to remember that humans don't have a good track record of our
No.
treatment of wolves. Thousands are being culled as we speak due to perceived overpopulation problems. So why are scientists trying to bring back more of these animals when their cousins are being blasted out of their homes? It doesn't make sense, and we need to focus our efforts on protecting animals that are already here.
I get that. Just to say, a rat, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, is a small rodent. The noun can mean also an unpleasant person who deceives others or is not loyal. And you guys think that's unfair to rats, and you want it redesignated and redescribed. And I don't know if James Cagney would appreciate with you, you know, because I think when he was going, "You dirty rat, you dirty rat," I don't think that he was really wanting anybody kind or nice coming to him or whatever, but that's historic film.
Well, look, this is a completely friendly request, and we want to encourage everyone to respect all animals. Rats are lovely creatures, they're intelligent, and they're actually very clean. So, you know, this was a friendly request to the Oxford Dictionary just to right a simple wrong.
Okay.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's 20 to 5 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Britain has just weeks to escape new powers, allowing the World Health Organization to recommend imposing lockdowns in future pandemics. A group of MPs and peers has warned the UK must opt out of the WHO's new international health regulations by July the 19th to avoid the body coordinating the response to any future COVID-style pandemics. We're going to now speak with the co-founder of the Together Association, Alan Miller. Alan, great to see you, my friend. Hope you're keeping well. Now, as somebody who was at the very forefront of pushing back on totalitarian lockdown powers from the very, very beginning, Alan, must be of great concern to you to know that future pandemic guidance might not be a sovereign decision, might not be the decision of the British people, more to the point, but the WHO.
Exactly right, Martin. We've got a situation where just as we decided in Britain to not be forced to do things with the EU, we have a scenario where the World Health Organization, which made all sorts of mistakes, and some would say some things that are even more concerning than mistakes, but an outlook that would mean that everyone has to go in lockstep with their particular strategy, with their responses, with their regulations internationally. That's not how a sovereign nation state should make decisions. We have now all seen the terrible consequences and harms of lockdowns in terms of what it's done to the economy, what it's done to the health service, what it's done to children that were coming through, what it's done to, you know, mental health, and across the board. We're going to be dealing with this for decades. And the idea that we should then have a knee-jerk response and, you know, jettison the pandemic strategy that we had all along beforehand is utterly unacceptable. We've seen that the COVID inquiry, Martin, hasn't even addressed the question of lockdowns and whether we should have had them in the first place, not fit for purpose. So we'd encourage everyone, your viewers, I know it's Easter, but we'd encourage everyone straight away to get onto their MPs and to write to the government. They can do it with Together, togetherdeclaration.org or at TogetherDec. But we're writing to MPs, we're writing to the Cabinet, we're making sure that the government's hearing from us, that we expect to have national decision-making and to have parliamentary scrutiny. That's the other thing that happened, Martin, if we remember. You know, proroguing of Parliament, jettisoning of scrutiny, public discussion and debate about costs and benefits of any measures. And if we're going to talk about science and being rational and reasonable, then that needs to have proper assessment and evaluation. And we need to treat the public as adults and grown up. And we have to make sometimes difficult decisions, and we understand that. But that should be something that we make together as a society and not just have things imposed on us with spies and censors and smeared, and then everyone wants to just forget about it after. It's unacceptable. So this is an important thing that's happened. Kudos to us for them and Molly Kingsley for coordinating it with some MPs. Many more will be getting involved. We've been supporting them and doing campaigning around the IHRs. It's really important.
Alan, you're absolutely right, because if we cast our mind back a short time, I think, by the way, we're all collectively trying to forget about lockdown. We've had like a national sort of disaster foisted upon us. We're always trying to block it out, but let's remember that we have political uniformity on this. The Labour Party wanted lockdown sooner, harder, longer. So did the Liberal Democrats. Very, very few people spoke out, but you are right. Some MPs are speaking out now. Suella Braverman, Danny Kruger, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, Esther McVeigh, Jack Rankin, Labour Party, Graham Stringer, DUP, Sammy Wilson, and also former Reform UK, now independent, Rupert Lowe are speaking out, as well, of course, as Lord Frost, the former chief Brexit negotiator. But Alan Miller, the people need to get involved too. This is the people's army. The public, the democratic mandate of Britain should be to put the public first. We cannot surely have a situation when an unelected international body like the WHO has the final say.
Absolutely right, Martin. We should remember that we got over 350,000 signatures to say that we did not want to have and we refused to accept the idea of lockdowns, and also a jab mandate where people have things, you know, like taken away from them, whether it's their job or access to areas based on a decision that should be entirely theirs. And we have won things along the line. And I know people want to forget about it. It was a terrible situation, but we'd be well-minded to understand that many of the measures that are still happening, emergency traffic orders with things like low traffic neighbourhoods and surveillance cameras, you know, the environmental discussion, we're all at risk, you must do this, if you don't do this, it's all going to be destruction. Often it's presented in these over-dramatic terms, fear PR, smearing people. In fact, the discussion around borders, the discussion around our economy, often we're presented that this is the only way. We saw it happen with Southport as well. We're presented as though we're all mad, bad and a danger to everyone, and we perhaps need to be locked up for saying things. We need to stop this whole attitude that somehow asking questions or challenging a consensus, or it's not even a consensus, is what a few in the elite think and how they treat us. And they say that we're either infectious or we're mad, bad and dangerous, or we're all this or we're all far right. We need to say this is unacceptable. It's not the way to run a democracy, and we need to stand together. We'd encourage everyone to get involved with us.
Alan Miller, always a pleasure, and you speak in absolute common sense. And remember, even if you agree with lockdowns, even if you agree with a future mandate on this, it should be a British sovereign decision, the electorate first. It should not be the WHO, the WEF, whoever they are, poking their nose into our business. Alan Miller, always an absolute pleasure there from Together. Get involved out there, the public. Superb. Now in search of some holiday sun this year, and who can blame you with the weather today especially? And here's the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, here's your latest holiday sun forecast brought to you by the Met Office. We'll see plenty of sunshine across the Mediterranean over the next few days, but also plenty of showers, some of those on the heavy side. Certainly on Tuesday, a few showers across the Canaries and Madeira, some more persistent spells of rain across parts of Spain, and then we head into a mixture of sunshine and scattered locally heavy, even thundery showers across central and eastern parts of the Med. As for the rest of the week, well, western spots will tend to brighten up, certainly some warm sunshine developing here, but plenty of showers continue further east.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening and welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. There's been plenty of rain around for many of us on Easter Monday, but it is going to be turning drier as we head through this evening and overnight. Plenty of clear spells in places. However, low pressure is still very much in charge of our weather. We see that weather front from today continuing to push its way north and eastwards, and the legacy of that cloud, outbreaks of rain continuing across parts of Scotland through the rest of this evening. For the majority of the rest of us, though, any showers that we've seen gradually starting to die out this evening, so turning dry with plenty of clear spells on offer as we head into the early hours of Tuesday morning. Where we do see those clear spells could be turning quite chilly, perhaps a touch of frost in places, and also seeing some mist and fog forming under those clear skies, but generally staying just that little bit milder across the very far northeast, where we do see that cloud and the continuation of some outbreaks of rain persisting through Tuesday morning. Across mainland Scotland, generally a drier picture, a bit of a brighter start to the day. Some mist and fog across parts of Northern Ireland will clear quickly through the morning, as well across parts of Northern England too. But across parts of Wales, the southern half of England, a dry and bright day. Plenty of sunshine and blue skies on offer to start the morning. As we then head through Tuesday afternoon, while we do see any sunshine across the southern half of the country, there'll be 1 or 2 showers bubbling up, though these likely to be much lighter and a bit more scattered than we saw on Monday. The legacy of that cloud and rain does continue across the very far northeast of Scotland, and then it's all eyes out to the west as we see this next weather front arriving. Feeling pleasant in that sunshine with highs of 17, 18, perhaps 19 degrees, but feeling a bit fresher across Northern Ireland. That weather front then slips its way south and eastwards into the start of Wednesday, so quite a damp start for much of England and Wales, but the northern half of the country seeing a brighter start to the morning, although still some cloud across the very far northeast, and some showers bubbling up here too. That sets us up through much of next week. Some showers, longer spells of rain, but some drier interludes too, and temperatures around about average or perhaps a little above.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 5 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, are we increasingly hostile to the BBC licence fee? Well, critics argue it takes the chunk out of people's disposable income, and because they rarely consume BBC services at all. Now, with the BBC's charter set for renewal in 2027, questions are mounting over whether the licence fee model still makes any sense. And a Labour insider recently claimed that our people, that means Labour voters, are no longer even watching the BBC, and they resent having to pay for the licence fee. So, should we still have to pay for the BBC licence fee? Well, joining us now is the former BBC journalist, great friend of the show, Danny Kelly. Danny, welcome to the show. So, a piece in the Telegraph today saying BBC dramas are becoming pure liberal elite poison. The plot lines are always the same, Danny. I watch a BBC drama now and I go, oh, it's the straight white guy that did it. And I'm always right. We know that there's an agenda in BBC drama. You're a former BBC worker. Do you think that the time has come to pull the plug?
Well, you're correct in your observation, Martin. The BBC is no longer a meritocracy. The BBC is a box-ticking organisation. And you can tune into any, let's just say any BBC panel show, for example, and there will be diversity on that panel, and it's because of a box-ticking criteria. Now, when I was at the BBC in the last 4 or 5 years, in my view, became captured after the Black Lives Matter protests around the world with the killing of George Floyd, and then all of a sudden, you know, diversity was amongst us on our screens and on our radio speakers. So the BBC is staffed by liberal, middle-class, almost bordering on activists, Martin. And you will see this on a daily basis. And it's almost like that you're having your nose rubbed in a steaming, fresh mound of cultural enrichment pooped out on a daily basis almost. And it's 180 quid, Martin. It's a lot of dough, 180 pounds. Now, the model that is suggested without the licence fee, then the governments are potentially going to get involved in the new year of January 2028. But the government, I don't think, would want that, because all of a sudden, if the licence fee income is £3.5 billion, and then there's some sort of dispute, and people are saying we need to spend more money on defence, for example, then the government will understandably come in for criticism by saying, people will say, why are you spending £3.5 billion on the BBC? Spend it on defence. And so I don't think the BBC will want to the government will want to get involved with this. And then the obvious question, Martin, is why don't you just commercialise it? And when you think that Channel 4, just one channel, the revenue is £1 billion on one channel. Now, the BBC could easily get more than £1 billion on the multitude of channels. And then the BBC will say, well, we don't want to be impacted by any commercial inference and we want to remain impartial. But I don't buy that. That's just a convenient fallacy. You know, if you have a commercial and it's a major car group, for example, like Volkswagen 15 years ago, who were fixing the emissions. Okay, so Volkswagen were advertising on the BBC. Are we honestly saying that the BBC wouldn't report that scandal impartially? Of course they would. They'd report it objectively. So don't buy that for 1 second.
OK, Danny Kelly, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And I wonder if people would support the BBC. If they put it to the market, if the BBC licence fee went to a Netflix or a Sky type subscription, I wonder if people would even pay for it. Danny Kelly, I'm not sure they would. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Danny Kelly, very happy Easter. What's left of it? Now, that's all we have time for this hour. But we'll have lots more reaction, of course, to the sad passing of Pope Francis after this, and of course we'll have some other content too. Live pictures there of the scenes at St Peter's Square as people gather to mourn the passing of Pope Francis.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's been a mixed picture over the bank holiday weekend, and that's going to continue as we head through much of next week. Some drier interludes are possible, but we will also see some showers and longer spells of rain. We've got low pressure across us at the moment. A weather front brought some rain last night and into this morning, and that will continue to push its way north and eastwards as we head through the rest of Monday evening. Plenty of showers following on behind, particularly across Northern Ireland and parts of Northern England, though those gradually starting to ease as we head overnight Monday and into the start of Tuesday. Where we do see those clear spells likely to turn quite chilly, perhaps a touch of rural frost in places, but generally just staying that little bit milder, particularly across the northeast of Scotland, where we do hold on to that cloud and outbreaks of rain into the start of Tuesday. So here it will be a bit of a damp start, particularly across parts of Shetland and Orkney through Tuesday morning. Generally for mainland Scotland, though, a bit of a brighter start, plenty of sunny spells to start the day. Any mist and fog that we might see will clear relatively quickly through the morning, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England too. We could see the odd patch of mist and fog in places. For parts of Wales, Northern England, generally a dry, bright start to the morning, plenty of sunny spells on offer to start the day. As we then head through Tuesday morning and in towards the afternoon, we will start to see some showers bubbling up, particularly across parts of England, Wales, maybe one or two across Northern Ireland too, though these generally not quite as heavy as we saw on Monday. Then all eyes out towards the west, we start to see this weather front arriving across Northern Ireland, pushing its way eastwards as we head through the afternoon, perhaps some quite heavy rainfall in places. But where we do see the sunshine, it will be feeling really pleasant. Temperatures 17 or 18 degrees, so a little above average for the time of year. That weather front then continues to spread its way eastwards as we head through Tuesday evening and into the start of Wednesday. Any showers across eastern areas gradually easing through the night, and that sets us up through much of next week. Some sunny spells, some showers, some longer spells of rain, but temperatures generally around about average, perhaps a little above in places.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Motorists on the A720 westbound between Streatham Junction and Gilmerton are facing restrictions due to a broken down vehicle. In Kent, the A21 northbound between the junctions with the A225 and the A25 has a lane closed due to another breakdown, so expect delays and use caution. Furthermore, heavy congestion is reported on the M4 eastbound between Junction 22 and Junction 20 in South Gloucestershire, with delays likely. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 5 p.m. on Easter Monday, and Pope Francis, the head of the Catholic Church and the Bishop of Rome, has sadly died. He was the first pope from both the Western Hemisphere and South America, ascending to the papacy in 2013 as the figurehead of the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. Now, Cameron Walker takes a look back on the life of an extraordinary man.
March 2013, and Jorge Mario Bergoglio stood on the balcony of St. Peter's in Rome and said a simple Buenos Aires.
Fratelli e sorelle, grazie tante dell'accoglienza.
It was the start of a very different pontificate from his predecessor Benedict, who'd retired from his onerous duties. The former Archbishop of Buenos Aires was the first pope to take the name of Francis, the saint of the poor and of nature. He was, though, to usher in a time of richer relations with his worldwide congregation, both in style and substance. And that soon became evident as he made his presence in the Vatican more accessible. Gone were the grand papal apartments. He moved to the Casa Santa Marta to live simply with others. When he visited the headquarters of the EU, he did so in a battered car, and a more informal approach echoed the approach of John Paul II. The carnival is over, he declared, referring to the Vatican's cliques and factions. There was instead a whirling circus of high-profile media appearances. The Pope wanted to be part of the modern world. He was clearly spontaneous and open. When asked about homosexuality, he answered, "Who am I to judge?" But did indeed pass judgment publicly on those who had been abused.
Faccio un sentito appello per la lotta a tutto campo contro gli abusi di minori nel campo sessuale come in altri campi, da parte di tutte le autorità e delle singole persone, perché si tratta di crimini abominevoli che vanno cancellati dalla faccia della terra.
This was one of his earliest challenges, how to deal with the spectre of child abuse that had hung over the Catholic Church. His papacy became an opportunity to end decades of evasion and cover-ups. But traditionalists were fearful of his modernizing tendencies, affirming in their view, when he banned the Latin Mass, a form of liturgy popular with conservative Catholics.
Buon pranzo e arrivederci.
He went on to speak one then of Muslims as brothers and was vocal in his support of migrants, even taking in some families to live in the Vatican itself. He also pitted himself against African Orthodox bishops on the issue of homosexuality, where Pope Francis went further than his predecessors. Although he never actually blessed the concept of gay marriage, he appeared to observe the rule of love above the rule of law. In a documentary for the Disney Plus channel, he also reflected that priests should be merciful towards women seeking an abortion. As the world was gripped by the COVID crisis, Francis publicly encouraged all Catholics to get vaccinated. He called this a small gesture of love in poverty, at a time when skepticism was sweeping parts of the globe, but the death toll was rising. Especially across his home continent of South America, he felt the need for practical as well as spiritual leadership. With the invasion of Ukraine, the Vatican needed to deliver its own message in the war of words between Russia and the West.
Questa bandiera viene dalla guerra, proprio da quella città martoriata Bucha.
Pope Francis denounced the wake of death and destruction, describing the war as a crime against God and humanity. He warned of a rising nuclear threat, echoing the views of millions when he said the world once more feels fear and anguish.
Per favore, non dimentichiamo di pregare per la martoriata Ucraina.
But despite this continued spiritual strength, his physical being was weakening. Knee problems left him using a wheelchair for long periods. In the summer of 2021, he underwent abdominal surgery, and then bronchitis hospitalized him in the spring of 2023. It was acknowledgement of his increasing frailty. He felt a malaise, he said, but I wasn't afraid. And he continued with his duties in all humility. He had admitted drafting a letter of resignation in the event of illness, making it impossible for him to continue with his duties as Benedict had done. But then, in a more recent interview, he reflected he had no real intention of taking that step. His ministry, he said, was his life.
Now, a short while ago, the US President Donald Trump spoke about the passing of Pope Francis.
I just signed an executive order putting the flags of our country, all of them, all federal flags and state flags, at half-mast in honor of Pope Francis. So he was a good man, worked hard, he loved the world, and it's an honor to do that. I want to thank everybody for being here. This is some band. I've heard this band actually indirectly for 4 years and very directly now for 4.5. And I like the direct method even better. But the Marine Corps band is very, very special. Thank you very much. What a great job. Thank you.
And that's Donald Trump there, passing on a message of condolence. Stood next, of course, to the traditional White House Easter Bunny. Well, join us now as GB News' correspondent Cameron Walker, live from Westminster Cathedral. Cameron, welcome to the show. I believe there was a mass around about midday in the cathedral behind you, and a short while ago the Archbishop of Westminster gave a press conference. Tell us about the mood on the ground and what Catholics have been telling you today.
Yes, he certainly did deliver a press conference, Martin. I think the overwhelming mood here outside Westminster Cathedral, and indeed inside it, is one that is incredibly sombre. And in fact, the Archbishop, Cardinal Vincent Nichols, said he hadn't actually expected the Pope to die today, because it was only yesterday, wasn't it, when we saw him on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica delivering his Easter message, wishing everybody a happy Easter. But of course, it was an aide that delivered his Easter blessing on his behalf. He was in a wheelchair, he was incredibly frail, well, but he was determined to do his duty. He also was in the Pope-mobile, waving to the crowds and blessing babies who were passed up to him as well. But of course, we got the news this morning that at 7:35 local time, he passed away at the age of 88. He had had quite significant health struggles in recent months, notably being in hospital for more than a month due to double pneumonia. But here at Westminster Cathedral, there has really been a steady stream of people going in and out, contemplating and reflecting in silent prayer, as well as attending that lunchtime mass, as you mentioned, Martin. And we spoke to some of those a little earlier who had come to pay their respects.
It was not any pope, it's our pope. It was our pope. And, well, I think it's the best for him because he stopped feeling well, or he was very ill. So I think it's the best for him.
And how do you think his legacy will be remembered?
A pope that made lots of changes, and he was very brave, and, well, he was a strong man with conviction.
It's certainly a very devastating news. He's the Holy Father, he's the head of the Church Universal, and I think all Catholic faithful in the world must be devastated hearing this news today. I think it might be too early to make a statement about his legacy now, but I'm quite confident his pontificate will be one of the most important pontificates in the modern history of the Church.
He was elected. I was also as a tourist here in London, and I came to this place when we saw that the smoke was white, and we all want to know who is the new Pope. So I'm very moved that today I hear that he's entered immortality.
Well, the Archbishop of Westminster said during his press conference that he believes the next Pope must be somebody of great inner strength and inner peace. But he says the priority and what we should be focusing on is the next 9 days of mourning. And at 5:30 this evening, a special mass is being held in the building behind me, Westminster Cathedral, the focal point of the Catholic faith here in England and Wales. And then at 6:30 in the Vatican, the Rosary prayer service will be taking place inside the Vatican, a Catholic tradition particularly associated with funeral rites. And of course, we will be expecting the Pope's funeral to take place a little later on, probably in a week or so. And the Pope has given us details of what he wanted his funeral to be like. And he said he wanted a simple wooden casket, not the traditional oak and lead, which would be associated with popes of the past. And he also wants to be buried in St Mary Major Basilica rather than the traditional vault which popes are buried in. So it appears that Pope Francis, as well as in life, was pretty humble, but he's also pretty humble in death as well.
From Westminster Cathedral, thank you very much there for bringing us up to speed. Well, let's now join Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, as a practicing Catholic, and get his reflections upon the passing of Pope Francis. Sir Jacob, welcome to the show. Could I first please get your reflections on the life, the achievements and the papacy of Pope Francis?
Well, it was clearly a very important papacy. That Pope Francis was a considerable change in tone from Pope Benedict and indeed from Pope John Paul II, that he was more perhaps relaxed in terms of his approach to the papacy. He was certainly less formal than some previous popes, and he projected an image of liberalism without ever undermining the teaching of the Church.
So, Jacob, could I ask you about the future direction, perhaps, of the Catholic Church? We hear a lot about inclusivity and progressivism, and is that really the job of the Catholic Church? For example, nobody would ask the same questions of the Muslim faith. Is it really the Catholic Church's job to be talking about things like immigration, climate change, LGBTQ rights, or actually, is it the job of the Catholic Church to stick up for conservative values across the planet?
The Catholic Church is not a political organisation. It's not for the Catholic Church to talk about political matters, because the Catholic Church is the repository of eternal truths. That's what matters. It's based on the resurrection of Christ, our Lord and Saviour, from which everything else flows. The Pope is infallible, under the terms set out in the First Vatican Council when he speaks ex cathedra, that's from his bishop's chair, on matters of faith and morals. So the Church tends to keep out of direct political matters. What the late Pope always did was emphasise the individual. And actually, I think that's important for politicians generally. When you're thinking about immigration, the individual who is trying to create a better life may be a very good, reasonable person, but the numbers are much too large for a society to deal with. And it's quite right that the Pope concentrated on the individual, whereas politicians have the practical business of dealing with the consequence of many hundreds of thousands of individuals. So I think the spiritual sphere and the secular sphere are very different. There's actually great debate that they had in medieval times about where power lay, and it was decided that the Church would concentrate on spiritual matters and leave us grubby politicians to get on with the business of secular matters, with the Church focusing on the next world rather than on the practicalities of this world.
And yet, Sir Jacob, the temptation to dabble in the political sphere is often overwhelming to the point of being impossible to ignore. For example, Pope Francis called for a ceasefire in Gaza. He commented after the murder of a Catholic priest in France in 2016 that it's not right to identify Islam with violence, adding, we all have a small fundamentalist groups, including the Catholic Church. So the liberal press seem to try and tease as much out of him as they possibly could.
I think it's basically a misunderstanding. The Pope must always be in favour of peace. The Pope cannot be a warmonger. I mean, actually, in the history of the papacy, there were popes who went to war, but I don't think one has since the 16th century. So, of course, the Pope will always call for peace. Bear in mind, Christ told people to turn the other cheek, that Christ was a man of peace. And the Pope also is not in the business of demonising whole religions, but concentrating on individual activities. And of course, preaching forgiveness. Christ said to St. Peter, the predecessor of all the popes, for the apostle on whom the papacy is based, those whose sins you forgive are forgiven, those whose sins you bind are bound. But Christ has also said, when asked how many times should you forgive 7 times, he says you should forgive 70 times 7 times. You should basically forgive indefinitely. And that's what the papacy stands for. And this, I think, is a confusion that politicians recognise that bad people need to be locked up in prison. The Pope has to forgive them. Bear in mind, John Paul II forgave the man who tried to kill him. So the papacy has to put forgiveness at its heart. Practical politicians have to be a little bit more ruthless. And we then have to answer for that, ultimately, on the Day of Judgment. But we have a different role.
So Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you very, very much for joining us once again on GB News and sharing your reflections on the life of Pope Francis. Thank you. Well, let's continue the conversation now because I'm joined by the journalist and the author, Joanna Moorhead. Joanna, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. Pope Francis was hailed as a moderniser, a progressive when he first took the papacy. How effective do you think he's been in that, and how much resistance do you think he initially faced?
I think he certainly tried to modernise, but I think he's met a number of obstacles. I have to say I rather disagree with Jacob Rees-Mogg and what he was just saying, because it seems to me that this Pope, Pope Francis, was all about joined up thinking. I think that he was very much about saying that there were not two separate realms, as Jacob Rees-Mogg was just saying. I think he was all about saying that we are the person we are, and how we behave outside of church is as important as going to church to pray. And in fact, when he went to prisons, and he was there just a few days ago, it was almost the last thing he did, go into a prison. One of the things he always said in prison, which I think was very striking, was, "There, but for the grace of God am I, a prisoner. There, but for the grace of God am I." So what he was very good at doing was not othering people. And in some of the things that Jacob Rees-Mogg was just saying there, I think there was a sense of othering And I think there is a sense of othering around a lot of politicians. Migrants are not really like us. And I think one of the things that Pope Francis said is, they're just like us. They're people like us. And of course, he's right to say they're individuals, and the Pope always concentrated on individuals. But what does that really mean? We're all individuals. Pope Francis was very good at showing the humanity of people. And I don't think that's something that people who are politicians can just check out of and say, that's for the Pope to say. No. And I think that's what Francis said. I think that's a lot of what he was about. I don't think he was, I think that in many ways, the Catholic Church is a massive tanker, and turning it round is extremely hard. And it's been said during this papacy that, it's just too big a job for one individual. And I think in many ways, that's what, that's how it seems. That just too many changes need to be made, and there's too many areas of resistance. And the Catholic Church is a huge organisation.
And Joanna, what do you think the future direction of travel is likely to be with the Catholic Church? As you said there, Pope Francis set about trying to modernise the faith, but when you look at the runners and the riders, there are clear divides about those who may want to continue that work and those who may wish to take the Church back to more conservative, traditional roots and values. Where do you think that battle may take us?
I think that Pope Francis has given how incredibly old-fashioned and slow-moving this organisation is, and it is. I think that he has done as much possibly as any human being could in 10 years or 12 years, whatever it is he's been there for since 2013, because I think that he has moved the Church on in ways that nobody will be able to take it back. I think just the whole way that he's presented as somebody who seemed approachable, who seemed relatable, has meant that there's a way in which the man or the men, and I'm afraid they are all men, who lead the Catholic Church won't be on pedestals anymore. And of course, all kinds of things have happened in terms of the abuse scandals, which has meant that we don't put them on pedestals anymore. So I think there's been a whole sea change, partly because of the terrible things that have gone on, vis-a-vis abuse, but also because of the direction of travel that Pope Francis has taken the Church, that I don't think can be rowed back on. And there are, like every leader in any organisation and any country, every leader has to do 2 or 3 things, don't they? That's all you get a chance to do as a leader. And one of the big things Pope Francis did was he introduced this slightly sometimes mad at times, and it was one of these things that nobody in the Church, the liberals hated and the at times, and the conservatives did as well, but this synod on synodality, it's a terrible sounding name for something, what even is it? But what it was actually about was the people of the Church, the people who are usually the last to be consulted and often are not consulted at all historically in the Catholic Church. It was about just bringing them into the room. I mean, that's really all it did. It brought them into the room. But they are now in the room in a way they weren't in the room before. And people like me, I'm a liberal Catholic, I'm a feminist Catholic. There are so many fronts, I think, that the Church needs to change on. But I think just bringing people, lay people, into the room is probably one of the 2 or 3 great things that Pope Francis has done that cannot be undone.
And yet, Joanna Moorhead, when we look at other faiths, is it the job of the Catholic Church to modernise, to become more liberal, especially when you look at the direction of growth across the continents, booming in Africa, booming in Latin America, perhaps don't share some of the more metropolitan, westernised values of the liberal Anglosphere? And we'd never ask those questions, for example, of the Muslim faith.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I know about the Catholic Church, but I know far less about Islam. So, but what I do know is there may be growth in other parts of the world, and there is this narrative that, it's European people like me who want to see change. But everywhere you look in the Catholic Church, where women are empowered, and God knows we've got a long way still to be empowered in any society anywhere in the world, but where women get more power, where they have more economic independence, the Catholic Church tends to be less important, there are fewer massgoers. Women are absolutely crucial in the future of the Catholic Church, and they have been marginalised, and they've been marginalised for centuries. And you may say today that women in Asia or Latin America who are Catholics are not campaigning for change. And actually you'd be wrong in some places, because if you go back to the synod the Pope had before the last one, that was in the Amazon, and we saw lots of women there arguing for change. And also on this synod on synodality that I just mentioned, where all these lay people from all over the world all gathered in Rome. And before that, there was a great consultation all over the world in diocesan parishes and diocesan level. One thing that came up absolutely everywhere in the world was give more power to women in this organisation, give them more leadership, give them the chance to be priests, give them the chance to be deacons. And Pope Francis twice had consultations on allowing women to be deacons. And I think possibly he wanted to go that far. But, you know, as I say, this is a huge tanker, and trying to change it is very, very hard. So actually, no, I don't think you're right. I think that women in other parts of the world are arguing for the same things that women in Europe are arguing for in the Catholic Church. It's almost, what other organisation really looks like the Catholic Church today in terms of representation of women particularly?
All right. Excellent stuff. Thank you very, very much for joining us on the show. That's the journalist and author Joanna Moorhead. Thank you for your expertise. Much, much appreciated. Thank you. Plenty more to come throughout the rest of the show, including much more reaction to the passing of Pope Francis. And we have some other content too. Live pictures there on your screen of the Vatican as thousands and thousands of mourners are gathering to mark the passing of Pope Francis. This is GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah,
and now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:26 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. And let's get more reaction now to the news that Pope Francis, the first Latin American leader of the Roman Catholic Church, has died aged 88. And join me now is the Professor James Orr, the Associate Professor of Philosophy of Religion at the University of Cambridge. Professor Orr, always a pleasure to have your company. Could I first get your reflections on the passing of the Pontiff?
Well, good to be with you, Martin. The first thing to say is what a sad day for the more than 1 billion Catholics all around the world. The Catholic Church remains the largest institution on the planet and the oldest institution on the planet. It is by far and away, just in objective terms, the most successful institution really in human history. So the passing of the successor to St. Peter is a sad day, whatever one makes, incidentally, of how the person carried off the office. But I don't think anyone could doubt Pope Francis's humility, his personal piety, and his willingness to step forward into a very, very complex role at an almost historically unprecedented juncture in the history of the Catholic Church, of course, with Benedict XVI taking the astonishing decision to step down, to resign as Pope in 2013.
And Professor Orr, much has been made today of the so-called liberal or progressive values that Pope Francis seemed to share, or at least in part, calling capitalism the dung of the devil, talking about sexuality, who am I to judge, on LGBTQ plus people, seeming to come to the defence of Islam. Do you think there's a pressure, perhaps uniquely, on Western faiths to become more liberal? And is that the direction that you believe that the Catholic Church should take, or should it defend the core values of conservatism?
I think there's no doubt at all, to answer the first part of your question, that there's enormous pressure on any institution in the West that is not towing the line on progressive values. And progressives simply insist that if an institution is not reflecting progressivism at every level of the institution in question, then it is somehow morally backward. It is not in keeping with the times and needs to change. It's extremely naive. I think there's an extraordinary arrogance in that progressive attitude. But to sort of answer the second part of your question, no, I think, Pope Francis, well, I think the Conservatives always suspected him of being a lot more liberal than he actually was. And I think a lot of the liberals also believed him to be a lot more liberal than he actually was. I think it's quite important here to distinguish between issues that are sort of here today, gone tomorrow, political issues such as, the nature of capitalism. That might seem to be a rather sort of permanent problem in the modern era. But of course, the Catholic Church has been around for 2 millennia. And really, from the very beginning, 1891, Pope Leo XIII wrote this extraordinary encyclical where he both praised and criticized capitalism. The papal encyclical tradition has always triangulated between sort of the free markets on the one hand and socialism on the other. And it's been a great, great source of wisdom, I think, to politicians who are willing to pay attention to that tradition down the decades. But then if you then turn from political to actual doctrinal, theological questions, Pope Francis didn't budge an inch on same-sex marriage. He didn't budge an inch on abortion. In fact, he was much more strident in many ways, criticizing abortion than perhaps his predecessor was. He never budged an inch on transgenderism, and so on and so forth, even though many of the sort of progressives within the Catholic Church and many progressives outside it, of course, wanted him to change and assumed that he could change. I think it's an extraordinary strength of the Catholic Church that it doesn't really matter who's Pope. It doesn't really matter if the Pope is a progressive or an ultra-traditional conservative. The Catholic Church is the Catholic Church. It abides by the magisterium. The magisterial teaching can't be changed. It can't be amended. It can't be overturned, no matter what your previous guests might be hoping for, no matter which Pope is in place. It's a very, very solid ship. It's not like Canterbury, for example.
Well, I was about to say that. Now, the Anglosphere, the Church of England, almost embrace wokery to the point of willing its own extinction, embracing values that perhaps people share that don't even go to church, and alienates its own flock. And is there a peculiar arrogance in the West, Professor Orr, of demanding that institutions take on liberalism, progressivism, wokeism, for want of a better phrase? But it would be a cold day in hell before they made the same demands, for example, of the Muslim faith.
That's certainly true. And there is, I think, a combination of both historical ignorance, that is to say, there's a sort of almost a pride in trying to reconstruct our public discourse as if we're at a sort of historical year zero, that everything that has gone before must be mistaken. It's part of the problem with progressivism and its illusion that as time passes, morality, we must get better, we always get better, and therefore anything in the past must be somehow morally objectionable. And it's a very difficult approach to pull off. I think it's a very ignorant approach. And in addition to the historical ignorance, of course, there's just a sort of tone deafness to religious questions too. I mean, Islam is very, very different, of course, in the way that it's structured. Sunni Islam, radical Sunni Islam, doesn't have a pope. They would like to have a caliph, but they don't. They've tried to elevate the odd person in recent years to the state of caliph, but it's a much more decentralized, emergent ideology than the Catholic Church, which is much, much more centralized, far more institutionalized, far more bureaucratic. And so really it's sort of, very, very difficult to compare these two phenomena. And certainly, I mean, both are completely resistant to progressive change. That is simply not how they're structured. They're built with all the antibodies to resist these here today, gone tomorrow ideologies. Progressivism is this week's fashionable ideology. Last century it was communism. The century before that it was Enlightenment, modernity, and the turn to the subject and the rejection of the rationality of religious commitment, and so on and so forth. The Catholic Church has weathered these storms down the centuries, and it's certainly going to weather this one.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you very, very much for your opinion. Always a pleasure. Professor James Orr, the Associate Professor of Philosophy of Religion at the University of Cambridge. Thank you very, very much indeed. Now, plenty more to come throughout the rest of the show. But now, if you're travelling home from work or from school, then here's your traffic and your travel update. And please stick with us.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The M80 is experiencing southbound restrictions at Junction 8 due to a broken down vehicle, so drivers should exercise caution and plan additional time. There are significant hold-ups on the M4 eastbound between Junction 22 and Junction 20, with congestion delaying journeys by up to half an hour. In Surrey, congestion at the M25 anti-clockwise entry slip at Junction 12 is causing 10-minute delays. Likewise, the A34 in Oxfordshire faces a collision between the A415 and the A4130, leading to lane closures and half-hour delays. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Okay, mind how you go there, safe travel. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including are women-only spaces being violated in London's NHS hospitals? Clue, yes, they are. The NHS Trust seem to think they know better than the Supreme Court. That's next.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Gynecological health, women's health as a whole, is one of the biggest societal challenges that we face currently.
What would you say, Josephine?
I've been massively failed over the 12 years that I've been dealing with endometriosis in many, many different ways. I wasn't believed to begin with. I was passed from pillar to post. There was a time where after an endometriosis surgery, I got sepsis. I wasn't believed and I was sent away from the hospital and the next day was taken back in quite a serious state. I think because I was young, but also because endometriosis just isn't taken seriously at all.
Is it because women go to the doctor and they say, I'm having really bad pains, and then what does the doctor say sometimes? Do they say, oh, well, everyone gets bad period pains, just have a bit of Nurofen? Is that what sometimes happens, Valentina?
Period and pelvic pain is a silent public health pandemic. It affects 9 out of 10 women. And research from the British Medical Journal tells us that we lose 9 to 12 productive days each year to period pain. But we can't really blame medical professionals, we can't blame GPs, we can't blame the NHS, because there isn't research that they can rely on. We have massively underfunded gynecological health as a whole. Currently, we spend only about 2.4% of our entire public health budget for the entirety of women's health. So that 2.4% is measly, and it has to stretch to cover breast cancer, maternity care, menopause, endometriosis. And because women were not allowed to take part in clinical trials up until 1993, we don't really know how most modern medications affect the female physiology versus the male physiology.
The People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:39. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now we've got some live pictures for you from inside Westminster Cathedral. There is a mass taking place there currently, as you can see on your screen, to mark the death of Pope Francis. There was a press conference a short while ago from the Archbishop of Westminster and also Cardinal Timothy Radcliffe. A mass now taking place in Westminster Cathedral. As we speak, we'll bring you more pictures from this throughout the rest of the show as that continues. Now back to some other news today, because all NHS hospitals in London are refusing to comply with single-sex laws to stop transgender people using women-only spaces. And that's been reported in today's Telegraph. Now, the NHS in England claims to have eliminated mixed-sex accommodation and requires all hospital trusts to have single-sex policies. But these policies include a range of exemptions, and that allows trans women, that's biological men, to share toilets, showers and hospital wards with women, which, if, as you recall, the Supreme Court last week ruled to be illegal. Well, joining us now to discuss this quandary is a transgender teacher and journalist, Debbie Hayton. Debbie, welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure to have your company. I hope you're having a fabulous Easter, or what remains of it. Debbie, it seems to be there's a disconnect here between what the Supreme Court said last week should become law and what the NHS thinks they should do. 28 NHS trusts in London have made no changes at all to any of their provisions on sharing wards, on sharing changing rooms, or on sharing intimate space with transgender patients. Does the NHS think it's above the law?
Well, who knows, really? What the least that the NHS should be saying is that they need to review their policies very carefully and very quickly, because clearly the Supreme Court's decided that what the situation was, where anybody could just decide that they wanted to be treated as a woman or a man and everybody else would have to listen to that. The Supreme Court's thrown that out, so that can't happen. So the NHS trusts need to review these policies, not stick their heads in the sand and think that it doesn't apply to them. It does.
It does apply to them, and one thing that's really concerns me about this, Debbie, is, you know, the NHS is answerable to the taxpayer, and we could have a situation where female patients who feel aggrieved, and by the way, the law backs them up on this, they could issue legal claims against NHS trusts. And Debbie Hayton, if that happens, then it's the taxpayer that will pick up the tab.
Yes, including me and you, Martin. And we'd rather this wasn't happening. It's ludicrous. The Supreme Court's actually the Supreme Court has spoken, and NHS trusts need to take notice of that. They need to review their policies and to come up with new policies that are compliant with the law, not ones which they think should be or they think ought to be compliant, because they're not.
And yet, Debbie, we also hear today that there seems to be something of a rebellion within the Labour Party. Certain Labour MPs saying that they're going to challenge the Supreme Court's ruling. They don't appreciate the validity of it. They stand with the trans community. Is this also a situation where first the NHS and now parliamentarians seem to think they know better?
Well, I think people are going through grieving processes. They've clung on to this ideology for so long and built their policies around it and built their ideas around it. When the rug gets pulled out from under them, it will take time for people to grieve that in some ways. And part of the grieving process is the disbelief. I just hope we get through this very, very quickly, because we need to get back to a situation that we can all feel confident with, and, as you said, isn't going to lead to claims which you and I and the other taxpayers across the country are going to have to pay for.
And Debbie, as a member of the trans community yourself, how did it make you feel when you saw 7 statues defaced at the weekend by trans campaigners, including that of the feminist campaigners, Nelson Mandela? You know, figures of great historical import were graffitied, daubed, obscenely vandalised.
Well, I was appalled by what I saw in London and elsewhere across the country. This is no way to win an argument, but perhaps it's the way that people behave when they haven't got an argument.
Do you think that's what it is? I mean, you're being very charitable. You can see on your screens there now, that's the statue of Millicent Fawcett. It said, well, I won't repeat what it says on there, but it was defaced, it was vandalised, and there was similar graffiti over other statues. Is this just a period of grieving, a period of people getting used to the new way, the new status quo, or is it something else, Debbie Hayton? Is it something more sinister, an abject refusal to listen to the law and an attitude of, we will not accept the legal precedent because we know better?
Well, they will have to accept it sooner or later, and better sooner. These things were appalling, should not be acceptable to anybody, any right-thinking person. And we've seen how the authorities go through social media feeds and pull people before the courts for what they might have said on social media. Well, lots of this at the weekend was being filmed, it was being streamed, it was being put up on social media. If the authorities are concerned about what people put on social media, and they have been in the past, then they need to go through all this with detail and find the culprits and bring them before the courts.
Very well put. Thank you for joining us today, and it's always a pleasure to have your company, and that's the transgender teacher and the journalist, Debbie Hayton. Now, we have a couple of statements to read out. An NHS spokesman told GB News this: the NHS is currently reviewing guidance on same-sex accommodation, and as part of this process will consider and take into account all relevant legislation and the Supreme Court ruling. And the government spokesman told GB News this: single-sex spaces are protected in law and will always be protected by this government, and trusts should follow the clarity the ruling provides. Now, if you're in search of some holiday sun, then here is the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello, here's your latest holiday sun forecast brought to you by the Met Office. We'll see plenty of sunshine across the Mediterranean over the next few days, but also plenty of showers, some of those on the heavy side. Certainly on Tuesday, a few showers across the Canaries and Madeira, some more persistent spells of rain across parts of Spain, and then we head into a mixture of sunshine and scattered locally heavy, even thundery showers across central and eastern parts of the Med. As for the rest of the week, well, western spots will tend to brighten up, certainly some warm sunshine developing here, but plenty of showers continue further east.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Good evening and welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. There's been plenty of rain around for many of us on Easter Monday, but it is going to be turning drier as we head through this evening and overnight. Plenty of clear spells in places. However, low pressure is still very much in charge of our weather. We see that weather front from today continuing to push its way north and eastwards, and the legacy of that cloud, outbreaks of rain continuing across parts of Scotland through the rest of this evening. For the majority of the rest of us, though, any showers that we've seen gradually starting to die out this evening, so turning dry with plenty of clear spells on offer as we head into the early hours of Tuesday morning. Where we do see those clear spells could be turning quite chilly, perhaps a touch of frost in places, and also seeing some mist and fog forming under those clear skies, but generally staying just that little bit milder across the very far northeast, where we do see that cloud and the continuation of some outbreaks of rain persisting through Tuesday morning. Across mainland Scotland, generally a drier picture, a bit of a brighter start to the day. Some mist and fog across parts of Northern Ireland will clear quickly through the morning, as well across parts of Northern England too. But across parts of Wales, the southern half of England, a dry and bright day. Plenty of sunshine and blue skies on offer to start the morning. As we then head through Tuesday afternoon, where we do see any sunshine across the southern half of the country, there will be one or two showers bubbling up, though these likely to be much lighter and a bit more scattered than we saw on Monday. The legacy of that cloud and rain does continue across the very far northeast of Scotland, and then it's all eyes out to the west as we see this next weather front arriving. Feeling pleasant in that sunshine with highs of 17, 18, perhaps 19 degrees, but feeling a bit fresher across Northern Ireland. That weather front then slips its way south and eastwards into the start of Wednesday, so quite a damp start for much of England and Wales, but the northern half of the country seeing a brighter start to the morning, although still some cloud across the very far northeast, and some showers bubbling up here too. That sets us up through much of next week. Some showers, longer spells of rain, but some drier interludes too, and temperatures around about average or perhaps a little above.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 10 to 6 with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now we have some live pictures for you now from inside Westminster Cathedral. There is a mass taking place now, a Pope Francis Requiem Mass that started around about 20 minutes ago as the church pays tribute to the passing of Pope Francis. We can see there people gathering, and there are crowds gathering outside and back at the Vatican. Thousands and thousands of mourners gathering outside the Vatican to pay tribute. These are live pictures from inside Westminster Cathedral. A Pope Francis Requiem Mass taking place as we speak. Now moving on, reports suggest that police forces have admitted they don't know if non-crime hate incidents actually help to tackle crime, because police forces across England and Wales have admitted they're not analysing data for non-crime hate incidents, despite logging thousands of the things every single year. Now, critics argue the practice stifles free speech and wastes resources, and with the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp calling it thought policing. Is it a complete and utter waste of time? Well, joining me now is the retired Scotland Yard Detective Inspector Hamish Brown. Hamish, welcome to the show. Thousands of these things are logged each year, and yet a Freedom of Information request from my friend Harry Miller from Faircop has said 14 out of 15 police forces don't know if they have any impact.
Yes, hello, Martin. This has been a complete and utter PR disaster for the police service across the board. This is at a time when They're coming under more scrutiny about not turning up at burglaries, not turning up at shoplifting situations, even when a shoplifter becomes violent. This is utterly appalling, and they really have lost, they haven't kept their eye on the ball, and this isn't going to help their image whatsoever. Now, just to be quite clear, there are thousands and thousands of hard-working police officers out there who want to get on and do their job. This is just given licence to those who are overzealous, and it's a small minority who have let the side down, some quite disgraceful behaviour, really. And I think someone hasn't just stopped, thought about it, and just thought it through, that this really has got to come to an end. And you're quite right to say about the analysing of the information coming forward. It's just not happening at all. It's rather that this white elephant, really, and it's talking a good job, but nothing is happening. So in my view, just get on, do your job. Yes, certainly some things have to be on the terrorism side logged somewhere, but please abolish this nonsense. Concentrate on what the job you're paid to do, and you will get the support from the public, and we won't have these unhappy headlines, both from the investigation of these nonsense crimes, also for not investigating the crimes the police are out there to deal with in the first place.
And Hamish, we've got a quick 40 seconds here. Do you think this is the case of just bad advice from above filtering down, and Bobby's on the beat, just want to get on with being a copper?
Well, I think that's precisely the case. I emphasise there are thousands of hard-working police officers getting on out there under enormous pressure, competing demands, but really they can't do their job because they're being diverted to something else. And it very quickly becomes the norm. That's the problem. So let's hope they get rid of this, concentrate on the job, and I'm sure the public will welcome that. How about solving a few more burglaries? That would be a good start, and turning up for shoplifters.
I think a lot of people would agree there. Police the streets and stop policing tweets. That's a retired Scotland Yard Detective Inspector Hamish Brown. Thank you very, very much for joining us on today's show. An absolute pleasure. Now, that's all from me today on this show, but I'll be back from GBN from 7 p.m. tonight, and that's GBN tonight. And up next, it's Jubes & Co. And that's the fiercest debate show in town tonight, presented by Dawn Neeson. Now, thanks for being on the show today. The sad passing of Pope Francis. There is a Requiem Mass, as we speak, taking place in Westminster Cathedral. And as I said, there are live pictures on your screen there. That Requiem Mass taking place as the world's Catholics gather to pay tribute to the passing of Pope Francis. I'll see you back at 7. Now it's time for your weather with Ellie Glazier.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's been a mixed picture over the bank holiday weekend, and that's going to continue as we head through much of next week. Some drier interludes are possible, but we will also see